Hello and welcome back to the Game Dev Show. I'm here with Yorai and Andrew. Today we'll be going over your game dev questions, trying to solve problems and help out game developers. Thanks for joining us live. Please hit the thumbs up button, share the stream, and if you have questions or comments or just things you want to mention, drop a line in the chat. We'll be watching it and responding, and I will be popping up questions as we start to answer them. So welcome, guys. Thanks for coming out, and welcome everybody again. Thanks for coming and joining us live.
Hey everyone.
Hi.
So there's a lot of stuff going on this week. We've got GDC coming up, a couple games that we want to talk about, and I've got a couple little announcements. So I think I'll just hit those announcements first, and then we'll dive into all of the other things. The first one was about the mastermind groups that have been setting up. So anybody that was interested in those, we had our first one yesterday. It was great. Everybody, as far as I could tell, really loved it, had a great experience, and I think it's going to be a good thing going forward. I've got the second one set up for today, and then as long as I get all this figured out and get it kind of automated, we'll be scaling it up. If you wanted to join in on that, just go to game.courses/mm. I'll pull in all of the new people as they come in before I get everybody set up. So make sure you check that out. The other thing was the conference that I'm putting on with my buddy Joe and a bunch of other people. The GameDev Guild will be opening up tomorrow. So just go to gamedevguild.com. You can get more info about it. I'll be sending out an email about it tonight and tomorrow and sharing all of the details about the conference. Outside of that, we're going to GDC. So if you're going to be there, shoot me an email, send me an email. We'll hook up or say hello somewhere, maybe out on the expo floor or somewhere. I don't know. I figure I'll probably end up talking to a lot of people there. So if you're there, hit me up and say hello. All right. That was all of my introduction stuff I wanted to make sure to cover. So how you guys doing this week?
I'm doing great. It's the slowest week of my life.
Been the busiest one for me. How about you, Andrew?
I'm doing well too. I think I've been purposely trying to sleep a little bit more, not successfully. I've been trying. I just haven't been doing it a little bit more for the GDC because it's going to be a very packed week. I'm going as well, and it's going to be. I'm going to be there for work stuff. I'm definitely going to be there for just my own stuff. I've blocked off hours of my calendar just to walk around the expo floor and lurk, and I'm going to be meeting people on my team that I worked with but never met and having dinners every night, and I'm going to be sick, I think, not from COVID. I do not plan on getting COVID while I'm there, but I do figure I'll probably end up like being so tired afterwards I'm just like sniffling. So I'm preparing for that.
The non-jet lag.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, I expect that to happen to me. My struggle is going to be the whole staying up past 8 o'clock thing now. I've gotten onto this baby sleeping schedule where I'm up at like 4 a.m. and asleep by 6:30. So it's I have to adjust, but it's definitely going to be worth it. I plan on scouring that expo floor too, just kind of going through and seeing everything everybody's got and talking to as many people as I can, at least. It should be, I think, a lot of fun. Anyway, today I released a video I just wanted to share. If everybody who's watching hasn't already seen it, it was about a new game that came out built in Unity. It was The Last Cube, and it was an interview with one of the, I think there are 6 developers on that team. So one of the 6 who was kind of explaining how they built the game, how they came up with the idea, and how they did it which was kind of really surprising, and I guess I'll spoil it, as a group of people. Like, these are basically like students in their spare time, and students who graduated, kept working together in their spare time, built a game and released it out on a bunch of platforms. And I really liked the game, had a lot of fun with it, and I think he might actually join us next week to come on and just talk about the game, let people ask questions, and I think it would be an interesting discussion. But if you guys haven't checked that out, definitely go check that out. But there was also another game that Yorai brought to my attention that I totally missed that Jonas did. So I think I want to pop that up as a screen share. Let me do that. Let me find the Will You Snail Game tab and then pop it up there, and we can kind of show it. So do you know much about the game? I've watched his channel quite a bit, but I haven't been keeping up recently. I didn't realize he was this close to releasing the game. Have you been keeping up with active development on this thing?
Before, yes. I had a time where I binged the channel, just like you mentioned. I just was excited to see that it's finally out. He also made a video about how much he made about it in the first week and talking about the expenses involved. And he also had the episode about the localization of the game and the community sourcing for it. So it's been really interesting. And I do recommend that everybody pick up the channel and try to watch it, because now you get to see an actual product made with the entire process involved. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in that. You can go in and play a game and then see the process of how it came together and see how the parts kind of came to be. If you have the time, especially, I think the best way to do is like play the game and then start watching the videos and figure out the parts that you find really interesting. So you have a lot more context there. But yeah, go check it out. I dropped a link in chat below too, so everybody can go grab the game and try it, or just go grab his channel. Jonas, I don't know how you pronounce his last name, but I'll link that in chat as well. So.
One more thing that's really nice to notice there is that on the store page, it already has overwhelmingly positive reviews, which you need 500 reviews with more than 95% positive rate. So that's really impressive.
That's
Just
great.
wanted to
Yeah,
call it out.
almost 1,000 positive reviews in just over a week. That's really good.
Yep. It's just really impressive to see that it's actually coming out and it's received well. Now I just hope he breaks even and has a good time with it going forward.
Yeah, it seems like a worthwhile project. I'm gonna grab it though. I didn't know about it yet. Oh, and it looks like I wonder if he's actually alive right now. To check that out, I gotta see if he'd come on sometime. That'd be really interesting. I think, or just do an interview or
love
something.
that.
I love it. Just have him hop on and chat. It'd be cool. All right. Are there any other things you guys wanted to take a look at or discuss before we start taking some questions? I figured we'll mostly take questions from chat, and then if we run out, we'll dive over to the question sheet where people have submitted them. So that way, people who are here live with us can get their questions, and I can just click a button and make them pop up. Do you guys have anything else though that you wanted to just bring up, discuss, mention before we jump into Q&As?
So there are two things I want to mention. One is another call out. Infallible Code and Thousand Ant had also a stream last week, and we didn't get to talk about it much, but it was really nice to hear about their origins and the things they talked about. Of course, more content about coding and working on games. So there's that. But a question there came up that I thought is really interesting to bring up. Somebody in the comments asked if there is a benefit for solo developers to use continuous integration and continuous deployment. And is it not overkill for somebody who works solo? And I figured it was a really interesting question to answer, if we could have our takes on it.
Yeah, I think that's worthwhile to talk about and answer. I saw that part too. And I think they even were loosely mentioning Chris Lucian's talk about setting up continuous integration. And I think so to put it into context, I think a while ago, this might have been like a year or two ago, I did an interview with Chris, who set up a game. He built it, released it, and he had complete continuous integration and testing set up throughout the whole process. He'd commit, a build would go up, it would get released, ship out to all of his friends and everybody that was testing it and stuff. And they were I think they were mentioning that as kind of like an extreme that you probably don't need to do. That's probably, you could end up spending a lot more time doing that and never getting around to doing the game. Because I've run into that process myself and that problem where I spend a lot of time building the framework for building a game, never get around to building the game, and then kind of get tired of it and don't actually, because I'm not making any progress on the game, especially, I don't end up interested in it. In Chris's case, Chris is like a automation guru wizard. So for him, setting up that automation isn't like something that he gets bogged down in. It's the kind of thing that he spends 20 minutes on, and now he's got this crazy automation. He spends another 30 minutes and he's like done for the year. He's not getting into that because he has the experience setting up the automation. And I think that for most people, it definitely could end up being a scenario where you burn way too much time trying to figure out if you don't already have some idea or some guidance on how to set up a simple CI system that's going to solve your problems, where you're not going to be debugging it and fighting it constantly. It definitely can be an issue if it's not done right. I've spent weeks building build automation servers before in the past for some projects, but for a simple thing, it should be pretty straightforward.
My own take on this is that at least if you use the simplified solutions like Unity's cloud build, that's actually incredibly valuable because you know that your project can build on another machine. So there's nothing arcane going on. You don't have some bad setting that only your computer can build. You can also get continuous deployment from the Unity cloud thing, like just connecting it to a chat channel, and then you can have a team of beta testers just test the project for you, which is just incredible. You get a lot of value out of like simplified implementations, and I think it's valuable even for solo developers just by the merit of not wasting time when you want someone else to even look at the project. If you're in the first year where no one is just going to watch your project and you don't even want feedback, sure, don't have any of that. But I mean, as soon as you get into the process of wanting someone else to have at least eyes on it, it's going to save you a ton of time. So
yeah. A huge, and that's where I think you have to make the decision is when the trade-off is worthwhile for the time, if it's going to save you time. If you find that you're doing builds, zipping them up and emailing them off to people, and that's a thing that you're doing regularly, then continuous integration is probably a good idea. You can stop doing that, never do that again. But if you're not doing that and you're just setting this up and then you're adding more to the process and you're never going to use it, then it's definitely a waste of time. So
also, because you mentioned the zips, Warped Imagination has a video about it, so you probably want to segue to that.
yeah. To talk, which one was that?
For making installers for your builds, in case it's just one-click solution to get that done. If you don't want continuous integration.
Yeah, you should just do that in the continuous integration. Have it give them the installer.
Andrew, do you have anything about continuous deployment with your packages?
I wish there was something like that. That doesn't exist. Actually, so I'm dreading not. I can't do it. Unfortunately, next week. This is the problem. So I need to update all of my packages. I'm updating some core scripts, work with the blend shapes and the I'm now calling the prefab and object editor or something like that. But basically, these crate scripts, amazing scripts. Everyone should use them. I've got to upgrade all of my packages because if I don't, then somebody's going to import one package later and it's going to overwrite the new stuff with the old stuff, and then there's errors, and it happens all the time. So I have to update all the packs at once, which there's like 40 or 50 of them. And Unity, in order to do that, you have to upload each and every package one at a time to the asset store and wait for it to finish. When it's finished, click the button, load up the next package. I have a script that I wrote that will bring things in and out of the file structures in the project so that I just have to click a couple buttons to bring them in and out, which is helpful. You have to wait, the good 3 minutes or 2 minutes or 1 minute or depending on the size, just for everything to recompute. Click the button, upload it again, wait another 45 minutes. And I have to do that for 40 or 50 times. So it's going to basically be a week or more of remembering to look and see if it's done. And you can't use that project while it's doing that. So I can't work on my assets while my assets are uploading for that entire time. Inevitably, I'm also going to find something I want to fix or update with the scripts, and I'm going to get 10 in and think, oh shit, I should start over because I want to make this update. So anyways, no, there's no continuous integrations, no source control access, which would be neat. Wouldn't that be cool if you could like log into a Git or a Plastic thing and just if you've got the dragons and you can click a button to always keep it up to date? Can't do that. So yeah,
I guess there is at least room for automating detecting that your scripts changed in another project and just importing that into your packages, but it's a risky move if you're trying to have stability.
It's tough. Yeah, I could probably host like some checker on my own server that says, what version of this file do you have, and is there a newer version. I do have a support package on the store. It's a free support package that technically will always have the latest version of these files, so you can always import that last. But yeah.
Definitely seems like a good target for automation, though, since you have so
Yes.
many.
Yeah,
I really like Steam's deployment system, though. I don't know. I wish everybody did a system like Steam's where you just could run a batch file and everything worked.
Yeah.
my
As long
favorite.
as the credentials are included anywhere.
Yeah. That's out of all the ones that I've used to deploy the systems, that's been my favorite. So makes it nice and easy and automatable. We've got a lot of questions. I figured maybe
Yeah.
we'll just start knocking a couple of them out. In fact, there's one about Steam right now. Let's just take that to start. And it says, I'm thinking of making a network game next. How is Steam's play? They're asking how Steam's networking system is. Is that good? They've heard it was pretty good.
Yeah, it's talking about Play Together, which I think it's specifically talking about the streaming local co-op solution Steam has.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that's what that one was. Have you used that before?
I have not. Yeah, it's Steam Remote Play Together. So, as far as I understand, it's just yet another streaming solution, which probably has compression and delay issues, but it's better than nothing, and it's way easier to implement local multiplayer than network multiplayer. So, do with
It's
that
not
what you
even
will.
close in difficulty.
Yeah, I mean, local multiplayer is less than 10% of the work that network multiplayer would need.
So then with this, you just code it as a local multiplayer, and then it sets up as another controller or another player, and they play remotely, right?
Yeah.
Essentially. Yeah. So, yeah, I guess you know about as much as we do. It sounds cool. I should try that out. It seems like a fun one to play with and actually like experiment with. Let's take another one of these questions here. So let me see which one I wanted to take. There was one about nav meshes and nav mesh colliders. Seems like an easy one. How do I get my nav mesh agents to interact and collide with standard colliders? Do I need to replace all colliders with nav mesh obstacles?
Okay, so there are multiple parts to this question. It's a bit loaded, but generally speaking, all a nav mesh agent does is that it tries to snap into the nav mesh. Something happened to my camera. And beyond that, it handles the pathing and it tries to move on the path, but you can actually disable these behaviors and do the movement yourself. Therefore, it's just standard collider, rigid body, do whatever you want with it. You just get pathing done for you automated. It also does very limited local avoidance. So there's that to consider. But beyond that, it's really just whatever you tell it to do. If you want colliders to dodge each other, then you have to include that behavior by yourself because the nav mesh solution isn't going to do much for it. Also, I think my camera is frozen.
It is. You froze up. Yeah. But yeah, I think you basically hit it. They either need to add the obstacles or just have those colliders be not navigatable and not send them through. If the collider is going to move around, just add the obstacle. Is generally the way that I would do it, though. Let's see. Let's hit another one of these questions while Yorai fixes his camera.
Yeah.
Oh, almost. Let's hit this one that says Infinity PBR. What model formats do you recommend to use with Unity? FBX, OBJ, dot blend? What is it?
Yeah. So I'm going to show that I don't know everything about model formats, but FBX can include things like animations and textures. OBJs cannot. But for a chair that you have a texture already in your project, or it's just something else, then an OBJ is fine. You can use that. And FBX you'll be using for characters and other things like that have, a skin mesh renderer, might have materials attached to it that can be included in the FBX as well. So they both work though. And in fact, actually, there's you can build scripts to export to OBJ from FBX, If you wanted to make like a statue of a character and stuff, you could do that too, and that will work perfectly fine in Unity as well.
And your characters, are they all FBXs?
Yes, I'm pretty sure the character would not work if it was an object, an OBJ, because it wouldn't be, couldn't animate. There's
Right,
no
but you don't send the the original Max files or Maya files or any of that stuff, right?
I include them when I can, so people can make their own animations with the rig if they want to go that route. But I don't think Unity will natively read those.
I think it depends on if you have the things installed. Sometimes I know at least it used to read some of them, depending on the tools that you had installed. But yeah, the FBX is generally my preference too. So that's what I like to see files. And if I get a file, I prefer it's in FBX and set up for Unity, because you can set up an FBX wrong and have it not be for Unity, which I think might be something worth talking about sometime soon. I think that might be one of the things I wanted you to talk about at this conference coming up. Maybe we'll discuss it then. Okay. There's another question about masterminds, and welcome back, Yori. Looks like your camera's working again.
Yeah, my keyboard decided to stop working too, so I had to unplug and replug it in.
I'm going to switch us so we're looking the right directions. There we go. We'll look at Andrew. This next question was about the mastermind groups that were set up, and it says, were all who submitted to be part of the mastermind group supposed to be notified, or not necessarily as it continues to be scaled? Sorry, I had a pop-up right in the middle of reading that question. So not everybody has been notified yet. I've been starting it off very slow because I just want to make sure I get the process down, get it right before I scale it up. I thought when I sent this out that there would be like 4 groups and maybe like 20 people, but there were over 500 people. So it's going to be like 100 groups, and I need to kind of process size it. We've got one that's been done yesterday. We're doing another one today, and then next week I'll take the lessons that I've learned from that, which has already been quite a few, and start to scale it up and get everybody invited. So I want to get everybody invited throughout the next month. Just take a little bit of time to get to all of them and make sure that everything's good. I got to join in on a couple of the meetings, but like I said, discovered some new useful things already. So if you're interested in that, game.courses/mm, you can go sign up and join the group. The groups are super helpful in my opinion. You learn about find like a set of people to do the same kind of thing you want to do. Let me find this question real quick. Is this it?
Not a question, but yeah. I just wanted to call it out because he's literally on the plane.
Oh, nice. Yeah, Nicholas sitting on the plane on a flight to GDC. Take everything learned. Awesome. I'll see you there. It should be fun. All right. Did you see that Johnny from Turbo made a new dots video? I did see that he has a video. I haven't had a chance to watch it. I've been nonstop in meetings and calls and things, but I definitely plan to watch it and plan to talk to the dots team a bit about it. I want to get kind of caught up on dots while I'm there. I think it'll be interesting. And then there's so many questions. I'm just going to pop up another one right here, and then I'll start going back to the pinned ones too. So if you have questions, again, just drop them into. Who's that guy? Hey, how's it going, Johnny? All right. If you have questions, drop them into chat, and we'll try to take them. I guess I'll watch super chats first, but I've got some pinned ones, and then I'm going to keep an eye on the live questions as well. So any advice for handling enemy AI in open world games? Is integrating different nav mesh on terrain the way to go? This is something you're going to have to deal with, right, Andrew? Are you doing this now? You have a big open world adventure game and you have enemies. How do you manage this?
So yeah, it's actually been a while since I've touched that aspect of it, but I remember not enjoying the process much because it is a tough problem. I originally was just playing on a nav mesh and just letting that do its thing. That's the promise of a nav mesh, is that you lay it down and the character can walk on it just like that. It's magic. It doesn't work as magical as the promises, as in my experience at least. So I think what I did was a mixture of a few things. I also tried out some assets. I tried A-Star Pathfinding Project Pro, which I couldn't get that working the way I wanted it. So I did a couple things. I think in the end, I used both the nav mesh for figuring out things like direction, and I used the nav mesh for figuring out how far it would take for a character to get to another position. For choosing a new position and finding out if the character can actually get to that position, like choosing a random waypoint. but then I use just some more basic code just to get the character to move there. Essentially, like, okay, walk then. And it walks, it's got root motion, so it walks forward because it knows it can, and then it's got a little collider detector in the front, and if it has something in front of it for more than half a second or something, it will automatically try to move left or right to go around whatever it is and avoid that obstacle. I don't know if this is the right way to do it. I don't know. I doubt there is a right way to do it. There's probably many right ways to do it, and it will depend on your project. This worked for me because I knew that not only did I have the enemies needed to go towards the player character, as they often do, but for this game, it's a real time / turn based combat, so you can go either way with it. And once the enemies are close, I didn't want them all bunching up right in front of the player, and then all like basically battling each other for position. So I've set up, I think, 8 positions around the player camera where they can get to, and if there's one's not free, they'll just walk around the outside waiting for one to be free. And so now when you've got, like, say 12 goblins coming towards you, you essentially will see that some of them will come straight at you, others will go around in order to get those side spots, because their real goal is to get to the side spots, not to get to you. They're trying to get to that position where they can attack you. So it's a combination of a few different things, and I did not get to the next part, which was much more complicated, where I wanted to add in a dragon that can fly, and I wanted to figure out, how can I make this work with the flying characters that can also go on the ground, and then they can fly over the nav mesh where people can't walk. So I didn't get to that point.
So just a quick tip on that: you can basically keep your floor finding, and then you can just do a scan up to see if that spot supports air travel, and then you can just let the unit travel if it supports air travel or not. Just a simplified solution there. But you just described almost all of the biggest games' best ways to interact with things. If you're seeing something in front of you, that's actually called voids, which have multiple solutions on the asset store, if anybody is not familiar. But basically, it's agents that just scan around themselves and try to steer away from obstacles. The nav mesh solutions specifically, most games would try to do waypoints that are scanned at different levels of granularity. So, for example, the Elder Scrolls games let NPCs scan the nav mesh in 3 different qualities. There is a super small one, a medium-sized one, and then the biggest ones. And the NPCs far away from you shouldn't consume the full performance and don't need full accuracy because you don't see them, so they can just use the lowest quality one. The ones that are only slightly away from you can use the medium quality one, and then only the ones closest to you that are like mid-combat and actually need that information right now and proper will use the high quality meshes, or rather the waypoint grids, which supports way faster calculations. Beyond that, you can do things like A-star pathfinding project. That's actually really fast to generate on the fly. So what you can do is you can only have the nav mesh around the character and let enemies that are and it regenerates as the character moves, and then the enemies can just stay on that and use it whatever way they see fit. Because if they're away from the character and the character doesn't see them and they don't have like a day-night cycle like Skyrim does, then it doesn't matter. Or you can do the nicer, more gamey thing where the NPCs don't know there is a nav mesh and they just try to walk straight to you. And if there's an obstacle, they try to go above it or below it or just move randomly. Or they just attack the walls, which is fine. Even Elden Ring does that. So do with that what you will.
What I've noticed is when with this stuff, it's often seems most efficient to start with the most simple implementation and build up from there, because oftentimes, aside from the quirks where yes, something might start attacking a wall, in the most part, you can get things working pretty easily without too much complexity, and it feels pretty complex once you have a bunch of things happening at once, and you see bad guys moving left and moving right, it feels like they're making complex decisions when each one is just saying, I need to move left or right. Let me roll a random die and choose which direction, or which direction is closer to the player. Slightly more complex, but not complex in the least. And if you add to that like additional things, like I love the idea of an enemy like dodging backwards and then maybe moving and repositioning. So this idea that an enemy could attack you, dodge backwards before you can attack them, and then another enemy can fill in that spot just because it's open. Nobody's trying to play strategy games with you. It's just that other enemy was there and they saw an open spot. They're like, okay, I'll take it. And then, but it feels now like they're working together.
Yeah, it makes it feel a lot more complex.
Yeah.
And fun.
There's actually talk about Dark Souls and how it approached AI, which is kind of funnily similar. People called the original Dark Souls enemies like super intelligent and whatnot. They just did random actions and like minor priorities, trying to not repeat the same action or something. I don't remember the details though. So
I don't know how many times I've heard people just guess on explaining how an MMO boss was set up that I knew the code for, or how like a whole thing was set up in a game. I'm like, that is so much more complex than it is. Like it picks 1 out of 10 at random or something. Like they defined all these patterns that don't exist all the time, and all these things that they think are happening as intelligence that they assume is there.
There's something that
we. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry, I just wanted to say that it's probably something that's really important to bring up. If you are making enemy content, you are not properly judging their difficulty. And that's because you know how they work and you know how easy it is to react to what they're doing, because you know exactly what they're doing as soon as they start doing it. And this is a problem I have common in Terraria whenever I make content like enemies or bosses. I know how to dodge them perfectly, and as soon as I see the attack, or even before the attack happens, I already know which attack is coming, so I'm already starting to dodge there. And we added in 1.4 update a boss, Empress of Light, which is a beautiful bullet hell boss, and it does a ton of projectile attacks, and they have different patterns. And everybody's like, this is super difficult. How the hell do you even fight this? When we were testing, like, what are you guys even talking about? I'm just sitting here with a double jump and I'm doing like everything perfectly fine. I don't need wings or increased movement speed or anything. And I'm dodging 1 step to the right and the entire attack misses. But it's just, I'm the only one who knows how that works. So it's just hilarious to me.
Yeah, that happens a lot in games. It's really easy to misjudge. You either think something's going to be much harder or much easier than you thought. Yeah, I've seen lots of people think that their stuff was going to be difficult too, and then somebody comes through and just tears through it, and they're like, "What the hell?" So
Hey,
it's go ahead.
I just posted a video. If you want to bring it up, the first 30 seconds, there might be an ad at the front, but the first 30 seconds show the goblins I was working on, and you can see them in action moving around and stuff.
Ooh, they're surrounding you.
Yeah.
Ready to get you. It's funny. So you had the 8 attack points around them. I've done that so many times. That exact same pattern. You just like make a circle around them and either drop down points or calculate them at runtime. And
yep. In this one, they're just they are 8 actual spheres just sitting in a circle around, and they have a script to, if the player moves rotates left, they'll rotate right an equal amount so that they always stay relative to the world rather than the player.
Okay. Yeah,
and when
so
you're
just keep their rotation and then follow you around.
Yeah, and when you're watching in the video or in the scene view, you just see these spheres just always around them, like a compass almost. So the rest of the video has nothing to do with that. So you can stop that.
Yeah, but it's still nice to see that you have editors.
Oh yeah, it's all about editors. Editors are fun. They make things more efficient. They make things more fun. And you talk about when you do things over and over and over, and that's when you do the build automation. I mean, that's what editor scripts are there for. Oh, you keep setting up weapons? Build an editor script to make it easier to set up weapons and easier to manage them. And you know that, hey, 6 months from now, you're going to have come back from vacation and not remember what you're doing. Well, make an editor script that includes tooltips to remind yourself what the heck everything does. It's like commenting code, but comment your editor scripts.
Tooltips are the best part.
They're
I
fun.
love those on the fields, especially if you're working with anybody else. It's great for yourself in the future, but with designers and other people, if you put a tooltip on there that says what it does and you do that consistently, they'll stop asking you, what does this variable do? What does this one do? What does this one do? And having you go look at code.
And the step above that is making easy workflows, so you don't even have to make the separate assets. You just have an asset creator window where you just pop in the fields that you care about.
Yeah.
Automate as much as possible and simplify it. I like your editors. I still have them up here playing in my other window. I need to dig through those a little bit more.
By the way, I just wanted to bring it up, but the thing about the compass of waypoints for the enemies to follow around the player is exactly God of War's solution. And specifically in there, they also mention how they try to prevent enemies being offensive behind the player's camera, so that the points try to always be within the view. And if they're not, the enemies get deprioritized from attacking, and they make sure there are callouts if the enemies do attack you from behind, so that you have time to react. It's just really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So, Andrew, there was a question. Do you have a release date for your game, a target release date?
I can make the announcement today. The game will be out in Q5.
Q5. All right. So
Just
we'll continue on to the next question.
Yeah.
No,
Q5 of a year, huh?
The real answer is I will be making headway on it in the coming months. I will start streaming again in the coming months. Life's about to calm down a little bit with some work stuff that's ending and other stuff, and I hope this summer to be outside working outside of Starbucks on the game. Into the night during warm nights and live streaming, and then getting something out that people can walk around in, just to start playing around and getting feedback on just how it feels before it's an actual game, just the feeling of it.
Nice. You're going to set up continuous integration for that, so you can
I'm going to be contacting both of you to make a video with me showing me how to do that.
I think we can. I think it's worthwhile. I'll help you with it. We'll set up a Steam CI thing. I think it would be cool, and it'd be helpful if you just do a build commit and then you have a new Steam release when you're ready.
Yeah, I think I'm going to need tips on also how to make updates as best as possible without breaking people's saved characters, and how to understand what I'm breaking when I make changes.
Yeah. That's a more philosophical talk, but yeah.
We'll just go through how your data's handled and figure out what things could cause issues and what couldn't. I think that would be fun. Be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, definitely.
We can figure it out and get that all set up and try to automate it so you can get releases faster and push stuff out quicker, make an even better game. Do you guys want to take this next question? Who earns more, Unity programmers or Unreal programmers?
It's an interesting one.
Yeah. Do you want to go have a take on that first?
My first guess is to say, well, there's two ways of looking at it: the average and the maximum potential, and then I guess the three ways, and then the more realistic view. The realistic view, I'm going to guess, is it doesn't matter; they're the same. The highest end view, I would guess, would be Unity, simply because Unity makes more games, so there's more likely that these games are being owned by the people who do the programming, and they're making the most money because Flappy Bird, I don't know if it was made in Unity, but
because they're the programmers making all the money versus like at some giant company where the programmer's getting a salary, which is probably a good salary, but they're not getting the entire proceeds of making the game in the millions of dollars or whatever.
Correct. And then if you take the average, it's almost certainly not Unity, because there's a whole lot of people using Unity just for fun, and they're not getting paid anything except for their entertainment value, which is worth a lot to a lot of people. I know it is to me. So that's my take on it. What do you think?
So skill-wise, specifically speaking, C++ programmers will always have the more interesting jobs. Therefore, they might be coming with more experience required, and therefore they will have better pay. It's just the assumption, the logical one. And as you mentioned, because there are a lot of indies and smaller developers trying to use Unity, the pay would also be consequently lower on average. So I would say if you're actually talking about trying to get a stable salary, I would look more into Unreal, but you have to actually have the skill to get into those big companies that pay the amounts that you're going after. If we're talking about fun value, Unity all the way, because Unreal has memes about how you lose on the fun.
Interesting. So I want to answer this one too, because I think it's interesting. I definitely think that C++ is, in my opinion, harder, and doing the programming there is definitely a bit more difficult, which should warrant higher salaries. But there's another part in there that kind of, I think, helps really balance it out, which is just demand. There are way more Unity jobs out there than there are Unreal jobs out there. And that's primarily because Unity is used for a whole bunch of other stuff. It's not just used for, AAA games. It's used for everything else. It's AAA games and pretty much every other bit of tech, VR, AR, business stuff, almost. I've done a lot of business dev contracts. Only one of them has ever even asked about using Unreal. All of them were using Unity except for that one, and even them, they switched to, they wanted to use Unity after they evaluated. And I think that there's just a lot more opportunity there, which helps really drive up those salaries, because those enterprise salaries push up the salaries in the game field as well. The fact that you can go do an easier job on some enterprise project and make, well, depending on your area, six figures or more, it really pushes up the salaries of the rest of the game programming jobs. And in my experience, as hard as Unreal is, the jobs that I was looking at the time, and even look at recently, they don't really pay any more. They're just different positions. And I think a lot of that was just because there's also a lot of demand. Those jobs that are these AAA companies that are working in Unreal and doing this thing, the ones that you kind of associate with it, there's a lot of demand to get those positions, or a lot of people trying to get into those positions that don't have to really bribe you with giant salaries, right? The salary isn't the selling point. It's working on that game. So they don't have to push the salaries up as high. So in my experience, it's about a wash, although I've personally seen Unity programmers getting paid quite a bit more than Unreal programmers in some scenarios, especially outside of games. But I've also known a couple Unreal programmers that are at the top of their game that make insane salaries too. Multiple six figures. But I've seen that on both ends. So you can definitely do a lot either way. All right, I'm going to shut up about that. There's a lot of money to be made either way, though, and I would expect even starting out to come in with a decent salary. I expect junior devs to be somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 in the U.S. Coming in, depending on the location. Obviously, it gets higher as you get closer to really guys like Andrew. Yeah. Go to the Bay Area or New York or something.
Or work remotely for though.
Yes.
First, find a company that won't cut your pay because you're working remotely and they know that you're getting cheaper housing. Yeah. Otherwise, come to the Bay Area. You might not be able to ever have a house that you own, but you'll be paid more. And that will more than cover the $3,000 a month rent for your one-bedroom apartment.
All right, let's hit a couple more questions here. Here, let's do this one real quick that's loosely related on game engine programming versus game programming versus game design. What are your guys' thoughts? I want to share mine real quick. Game engine programming is what I used to think I wanted to do back when I was younger. I used to think I want to make my own game from scratch and other stuff. Game programming is game design is what I thought I wanted to do after that, when I thought, like, I just want to come up with the ideas for how to make what would be a fun game and like put the content in. And game programming is what I actually love doing, where you actually take the design, the idea, and the engine and slap them together and make an actual game. So that's my thought, is that game programming is like kind of taking the benefits of, or the uses of both of those other things and combining them into something fun and usable and entertaining. And that is where I really love to work and what I like to do. I think it's got the most opportunity and the most entertaining. What about you guys?
Game design is what I want to do, but I'm a stickler for the details, and I'm getting extremely mad when I don't get it exactly right. So I became a game programmer, but that still isn't enough because sometimes the engines don't let me do whatever I want, so I ended up needing to become a game engine programmer.
That is hilarious.
Yeah, so that's my thoughts on it. I really want to just be able to manifest the designs that I wish to have, but things get in the way, and it's due to necessity that I learn a lot of things.
That's an interesting take on it. I wonder how much of the answer comes down to a person's like sentiment around control and whether they're the one that wants to be in charge of the things. Because if you're just a programmer, you can choose which projects to work on it once you get to a certain level, of course, but you're still working on somebody else's project, right? You can inform it, you can consult with them on figuring out how to improve it, but it's somebody else's thing. I a long time ago, I went to school to be an actor, and I ended up getting a directing degree because the directors that we had to work with in the directing program weren't making the projects I wanted to make. And so I wasn't given the roles in college that I wanted to do as an actor. So instead I started writing and directing my own stuff and of course acting in it myself. Similarly, I once took some classes in architecture because I thought really cool architecture is really cool. But I dropped the classes when I realized that I had to learn how to do all the stuff I didn't want to do. When all I really wanted to do was be more about the overall bigger picture type of thing. And now with games, it goes similarly. I want to make my own games, so I don't want to work on other people's projects necessarily. I definitely don't want to work on an engine. Programming is fun, but it's not the thing I want to do first and foremost. First and foremost, I'd rather end up being the design rather than programming. But given the nature of a solo or very small team environment, you wear multiple hats and you don't have that separation of roles. So everyone ends up doing lots of different things. And as a game programmer, Jason, I wouldn't be surprised if there may be times where you're also the sound designer, or rather the sound curator when it comes to the asset store. And you're just
Usually the guy that forgets that we have sound. I'm like, oh yeah, we're supposed to add audio. I gotta hit that mute button. I play with Unity with the mute audio button on so often. It's like the last week. I'm like, oh yeah, we gotta add sound to the game. Gotta remember that.
That's unfortunate.
So a funny side story about that, but I usually also mute Terraria when I work on it because I'd like to listen to other things as I work on it.
You've heard it so many times, it'll drive you nuts after a while.
There was one time where we got a weird crash that we couldn't replicate no matter what we're doing. And the one guy who had it, after looking at the entire difference in settings, he had audio enabled. And apparently, because the audio was on 0, it never actually needed to load, and it never triggered the bug for us. And we burst laughing so bad.
The only one that had audio enabled. That happens, and it's not like the audio is bad or anything. It's just that you get into the thing, like you hear the intro music the first time, and like, oh, that's cool. And then you hear it for like the first week, and like that was neat. And then like a month later, you're like, I don't want to hear this anymore. Like I gotta stop hearing the same little tune and the same attack sound.
Yeah, and just to clarify, not all games let you just pop into every scene like Unity does, where you can just load a level and not have those intros. You sometimes have to go through the entire process just to get to where you are. And once you have that and you have a loading screen, God help you.
Yeah. All right, let's take this question about stocks. Andrew, what does the banking and stock market use? Do they use Unity or Unreal?
Unity. There's articles out there that the New York Stock Exchange, I think it is, or whoever does the IPOs, uses Unity for their IPOs in the virtual COVID world. I don't know exactly the details, but Unity is used when a company goes IPO and all their employees get to join virtually in ringing the bell and other things. They use Unity for that. So when it comes down to it, the banking stock market use Unity, not Unreal.
There you go.
And people who like to make pretty visuals for others to consume also use Unity a lot, interestingly enough. I had a friend that tried to make an AI predict how stocks would go up and down by pulling information and just trying to visualize it nicely. And he did it in Unity using the UGUI system. So that was really interesting to see.
Yeah, I've recommended Unity for all kinds of pretty fancy, flashy UIs like that. I think it works really well. It's so easy too. So you can make these things nice, pretty, and fancy. You don't have to go make a video and edit stuff and then try to figure out how to get JavaScript to work right and get it to work in all the browsers or anything else. Just build a simple game, push it out there, and it works. Everybody, I like this comment here that our backgrounds, I know you're stealing Jason's, but it does kind of look very similar, almost like we're sitting together.
I'm not stealing it, I'm invading it.
I mean, we could organize our virtual backgrounds to just be seamless.
What, make it look like one big room?
Yeah, and if we're all back so you can see our shoulders, then it would look like we're sitting next to each other.
Start passing you drinks. Oh.
All right, we need rehearsal for that, but yeah.
Let's take this question. I heard MVC is considered an anti-pattern for Unity games. Can you guys explain why?
What is MVC?
Model View Controller.
Yeah. So, talking about it comfortably, Unity is your view. So having a view in your view is beating the point.
Yes, the scene, really, like that scene in game view. Right?
Yeah. Beyond that, I wouldn't really say it's an anti-pattern in Unity. It's just more that it's abused in Unity in a common degree. It's perfectly fine to make a raw data format, something to control it, and then something to display it. It's just make sure you're not making two display layers.
Right. That's usually where the issue, in my experience, comes to. So for people who don't know, model view controller, you have the model that's got the data, the controller that's supposed to kind of control things, and the view that displays things. And you're always talking about people in Unity end up with multiple views. They have some code version of a view, and then they have the view in Unity that they have. And I think that the model and controller part makes a lot of sense most of the time, having your data, or at least your persistent data, the stuff that you care about keeping around in some data structure, and then something controlling it. But the view, should be probably the object and not some extra layer of abstraction. That's where I think people, they copy from the web world and they start to code up this view layer, and then sometimes it makes sense and it really fits into the game. But most of the time what I see is it's just an extra layer of abstraction that makes it more confusing, and you can't figure out what the controller is doing. Right? You can't figure out what the player controller is doing because it's moving another thing that's moving another thing for no benefit at all, because it's never getting swapped or replaced or doing any of the things that MVC is good at. So,
yeah, I mean, by the core of it, you're trying to make code that's useful, not just architecture for the sake of architecture. So, yeah.
That's generally the thing. Like, use it if it fits in and you're already kind of working with that way, but don't just try to slap it in. I've done that myself. I want to admit, like, I am definitely guilty of this. I did this when I was working on a project with Dave. I fucked up a game jam one that we were doing with MVVM stuff. So I'd gotten, for some reason, on a big MVVM kick for like that month, and decided I was going to use this MVVM framework in there and pop it in there. Ended up wasting like the entire time setting up this stupid UI stuff that made no difference at all and making little to no progress. It was one of those distraction things. I got stuck with this pattern that worked great in all these other situations I was using it in. It's like, I want to see it in here and try it out, and tried it, and it was not the way I would recommend going, at least.
Yeah. We're all very, very prone to trying to architect something godsend and like really pretty and smooth and simplifies the one thing you're trying to do to one line, and then you'll never use it for anything else.
You do it the one time, you use the one liner, and then I've noticed that as I get older and more experienced, my code gets simpler, and less abstracted. My desire to make abstractions goes down and down and down until I actually really, really need them and they make sense. So, question for Yorai: do you ever build your own classes in Unity from scratch with constructors to initialize variables in class? So, non-mono behaviors. I'm going to guess that's a yes.
Yeah, a definite yes. There is.
Do you want to give just an example of one?
Yeah, sure. So when you have things in Unity, not all of them have to be mono behaviors in the scene, and not all of them have to be assets such as scriptable objects. You can have a raw class, and that's not constrained to having Unity's lifecycle, where it has awake and all of that. So you can just do whatever you want with it. If we're talking about cases where I have these classes, I would usually do that for customization options for characters that I want persistent and serializable. So I would say here is the color choices that the player made for their outfit. And it's just going to be a list of colors for like each part of the outfit. It's just going to be a class, and something is going to present it, as we talked about just a moment ago. And it's just a C# class, nothing special about it. And if I need to construct it such as that it knows what player it belongs to, then I can.
Right. So that's like a data structure, and one of the things you use it for. What about other just behavioral classes? Do you create like manager classes or other things that end up not connected, or maybe just like abstraction layers? I know Jason Story probably has like 300 different abstract classes that he creates, that have nothing to do with Unity. But do you have anything like that? I'm struggling to think of some. I have a couple that I do.
My most common one for this is a stats calculator, which will calculate stats for a character that doesn't need to have anything regarding information. It's just doing things for you. And if it's keeping any state, like remembering all the stats and their sources, then I can keep it all within the calculator. And just when I'm getting a result, I'm using that for whatever I want. I tend to do that a lot because I'm trying to make more complex games, so like Diablo and League of Legends, where you also know the source of like what is actually giving you the stat points. So I have a calculator that says add this calculation to this stat. So it takes the object, gets its stats, then it keeps like the source object and also adds the benefits or detriments, calculates it all, puts it into stat buckets. So I have a strength bucket, an intelligence bucket, a dex bucket, etc., etc., etc. Just dropping all of the stats in their sources, and then I can get the result, and I know the exact amount and why it's that amount, who contributed to it per stat. And none of that is scriptable objects or mono behaviors or anything. It's just raw C#.
That makes sense, and that's kind of a very similar to some scenarios I can think of as like looking back in my head at some code, because a lot of the time I do default to a scriptable object or a mono behavior, but there are definitely lots of cases like that with these other scripts. So yes, you do create them all the time, but
yeah, it's mostly for runtime things that I know I'm going to reuse in mono behaviors, because I tend to separate my scriptable objects from having any behavior. I tend to treat them as data assets, not behavioral things. And mono behaviors, of course, they need to have behavior. They are mono behavior, it's in the name. But what they do sometimes relies on common pieces. And this is where I am making raw C# classes and using that. Like, if you ever use the list in a mono behavior, that's an example of a C# class that you'll be using. Any repository for information, anything like that.
All right, let's take another question. I think, Andrew, I'm curious what yours is. I have an answer for this. The answer, I popped this one up because the answer came instantly to my head for this. But I'm curious what your answer is on this one. The question was, what's the hardest thing you did in the past, but now is extremely simple to do? Something that maybe 5 years ago or whatever was really hard and you dreaded doing, and now is simple, or maybe 10 years.
This is hard because I don't think I have a clear one answer, but rather just in general, everything I do is easier now than it was before. Like now when I sit down and make a new module for my game module things, or if I make it just working on my own project, or even updating the code that I wrote, that I'm updating that I talked about earlier that I need to update. Going through that, this is old code. And Uri saw some of this, a very old code, not very well structured. And I'm going through thinking, damn, half of this I can easily upgrade and make it better. The other half, I have no idea what the hell I was thinking at work, so I'm going to not touch it. But man, I need to start from scratch because this is chaotic. And so I think in general, it's it's like riding a bike. I've gotten just much more natural at doing things, and I think patterns. I don't know the names of all the patterns. When we talk about all the different design patterns, I know I use them, but I don't know the name of them. I've never been good at names and dates and such, so I kind of shy away from learning that aspect of it. But I'm using patterns that I wasn't using before. I think in general, I'm better at structuring my scripts in the right way than I was before. Large degree because of the help I've received from you guys, from Jason's story, just teaching me the things that I never learned because I didn't go to school for it, and that because I just never picked it up along the way.
Side note: I learned zero of my game dev stuff at school. like none of it I learned at school. My school was on electronics. I learned electronic stuff that I never use anymore. Yeah. And the programming was like microcontrollers and assembly. So.
Well, at least it's easier for you to do now.
Yeah, that stuff like that. At least it makes it nice. So like when I want to randomly grab some little boards like these and start programming lights and stuff, like I have a loose idea. I can kind of remember what some of the things are. But outside of that, yeah, it's all been just figuring it out on the job and learning from other people, reading, and all the research stuff. So what about you, Yuri? What used to be hard and now is simple?
Making updates for Terraria. So funny story about that, but when I started, I got really, really nervous. It was my first job, and I'm like super excited to try and make anything. And working on the updates, it's like I didn't know what's going to happen as soon as we release. And of course, it's a small company, so we don't have a lot of testing capacity or automated testing or et cetera, et cetera. And what ended up happening is on the release day, we got like 100 bugs. And they were repeats, and there was a lot of stress about it because I thought, oh no, we failed something terrible. It's going to be like catastrophic, and the entire thing is going to collapse, and it's all my fault because I did that one line that broke on one of
You
these
ruined
bugs.
the game, Yuri.
Yeah, and it was like really, really stressful. But the update was still like extremely positively received, and as soon as we can handle it, it's not like it's breaking everybody's day. We do respect that we don't want anybody to have any issues. I'm just saying that it used to be way more crippling to try and handle these things as soon as you see them, instead of getting past that feeling and just starting to handle it as soon as you can, and making sure everybody's having a good time. And thanks to that, we also reduced the amount of time that we need in order to deploy a hotfix and just get past it. In 2015, when we had Terra 1.3, it was a huge update. It was like 1 year of work dropped into one update. As soon as the game launched for the first person, we had an immediate message that said, hey, I got 2 achievements just for opening up the game. And what ended up happening was we had code for giving the player achievements for using Life Crystal and Mana Crystal, which increased your max life and max mana. But the numbers that were checked are the current life and mana, and not the added life and mana. So everybody got the achievement as soon as the game booted up. And I'm like, oh no, I'm breaking everything. Everybody's getting the achievements. They're not supposed to get what's going on. And I get super stressed. But now I can just like, yeah, okay, so this happened. I'm fixing it right now, and I'm going to deploy the hotfix in less than 30 minutes from within what's going on. For both Steam and GOG, and making sure the dedicated servers are available. And I'm also updating I'm giving hashes of the builds for the modding community so that the installers for the mod loader can work for that. And it's all just automated these days, and it's happening extremely quickly. And I'm not losing my shit whenever that happens. So that's one thing that's extremely simple to do now compared to the past.
That's awesome. That's a huge change too. I know when you first start out somewhere and like you make a little mistake, it freak out. Like it happened to me multiple times. Like, oh shit, I just ruined everything. Like I'm probably gonna get fired now. Everybody's gonna kill me. Like, what have I done? And I find out, oh no, I can solve that quickly. I can fix that, or you can fix it. Or go tell somebody like, oh yeah, we got a backup of that. Let's go fix it real quick.
Yeah. Don't put your head down and be sad about it when it happens. It's the time to act when there's a problem.
Yeah. So if you break something, just say, hey, I think I might have broken this. Can we fix this? Get help and start working on it. Yeah. Unless you already know how to fix it yourself, then fix it yourself.
Yeah. If you know how to fix it, go ahead and do that, and also own it so everybody knows to calm down. And telling them that you can fix it is going to increase confidence too. So yeah, it's just good practices all around. Release times is just the best thing that could have happened to me, in my own opinion, because the stress of a bad release was crippling, but it's really not as bad as it looks in most cases.
Right.
And
it's fixable at least.
Yeah, and if you have one good release or two good releases, remember those and try to make sure everybody slides back into that. Because we had plentiful of releases that had zero problems, and we were just eagle watching hawk-eyeing the entire Discord servers and forums and trying to make sure that if anything pops up, we're responding immediately. And just nothing happens, and we're just 2 hours there just watching. So those days are like really, really nice. And because we improved the process of finding things before they happen, yeah,
it'd make it a lot easier. So I'll jump in with my answer on this one, which was, and somebody else had mentioned this in chat, starting new projects, like starting an actual blank project. I mean, this used to be hard, especially when I started in game development, even like the first maybe 5 years into game development. I felt like the idea of starting a new project and just having the idea of what to do and how to get started on it and actually build it into the game that I wanted was very, very difficult. And that's going through the process so many times over and over and over has made it so that now it's extremely simple. And now it's just like the thing that I love to do the most, right? Start projects. I like to do that more than all of the rest of the things that I do. One other thing that got easy though was talking to people online and in person and asking them to hit the thumbs up button. I would say probably 8 years ago, I never would have thought I would talk to people in public, let alone online or anything like that. Always super quiet and relatively chill. So yeah, I don't know. Those are the two big ones for me. So hopefully that's helpful. Let's take a couple more questions. So reading this other chat here. So how do you organize your files by feature, system, type of class, etc.? I'll answer mine first and then see what you guys do. Generally, I organize them by system, but also by file type and then by system. So I know sometimes people will do a setup where they'll have a system and then underneath it they'll have all of the art, code, and materials and other files for that system in that subfolder. I generally have something somewhat similar where I will have art folders. I'll have an art folder. Underneath there, I'll have my characters. Under there, I'll have each character and then the specific files for that character. And the same for environment things and all of the rest. For systems, I'll have a folder if there needs to be one, and then there's a systems folder for each system in the scripts or code folder. I used to rename that scripts folder, but since Unity just calls it a scripts folder, I've just left it. I got to the point where like I'm just leaving it as scripts. That's what Unity calls it. I'll just call that, instead of I used to rename it like source and a million different other things throughout the years. Now I just leave it so that I can stick with the Unity standards. Probably partially a side effect of just recording too many videos too. Right? So what about you guys? Do you like reorganize or move things around, or do you have a structure?
Andrew, you want to take this?
Sure. I definitely have a structure that's formed, and it does change over time, But what I generally start out with, so I've got two things. One in the art packs and the asset packs I put in the asset store, and one for my own projects, very similar. But the asset store stuff, I like to, and for my own projects too, really, I like to keep prefabs external from all the other stuff. and I always put an underscore at this front so they're at the top too, because that's where I'm going to the prefabs more than anything else. So I always like to keep those at the very top and keep that organized in that way.
That's one of my root folders too, by the way, Andrew. I have a prefabs folder, a scripts folder, and an art one.
Yeah, because once you got set up, you're not going to go to the textures very often. You're not going to the materials ever, and all that. So I keep those separate. I have a scripts folder. I have an editor folder. I've gotten better. What I tend to do is, as things get bigger, I will then start building subfolders to organize those a little bit more. With my last update that I was talking about last night, I created a new folder called Equipment System, basically. And so now all the scripts that have to do with that system are in that folder. It's the equipment system. It's got an editor folder and a scripts folder. That's it. It's going to have a README too, probably. But that would, because what I found was that now I had 6 or 7 scripts in each of those folders, and they were in the main editor and scripts folder, but they were harder to find. And when I wanted to, export just those scripts, I realized, okay, these are all clearly related to each other, and I've got too many in these other generic folders. So I'm going to put them into their specialized folder that I can just now know this is where I go for this type of stuff. And I think I do that in my main project too. Like, it starts out just being a few folders, and as I get bigger, I'm like, okay, well, now I need to organize it by, I need one for scriptable objects. Now I need, the scriptable objects has 30 things in it. Well, clearly I need to separate that out into weapons and characters and this and that. And it just logically grows out of that, but I never start with a complex hierarchy, except for just knowing that I'm going to separate materials and textures into one. I don't separate those into 2 because of the way Unity works with populating them. It's a hassle to have them in separate folders because you keep having to go back and forth between the folders. So aside from that, everything gets its own little folder: prefabs, models, scripts, and then you go more complex after that.
I mean, that's a really great way to go, specifically for convenience. And I match it whenever I do work in Unity, though recently I've been trying to pick up more conscious tying up of how I have my content. And I found that I specifically handle code and assets differently, where code is separated by domain. So you could say it's the feature, but I would have things like a damage domain namespace, where everything under damage folder will be in the damage namespace, and then I have a damage request, a damage result, a damage taker, a special damage taker, whatever have you, damage calculator. All of these things go under damage, but they're not related to content. And then when I'm looking at content, I'll have things like the hero, and the hero will have its model, its materials, its textures, and all that just in one folder of the hero. I like to keep it by feature. So if I need to say we no longer have a hero, delete the hero, I will delete the hero. Now, one thing that it's prone to happen is that as you make another piece of content and they're rather similar, you want to share assets. Now, I don't have the best solution for that, but I ended up making a shared folder, and I'm just dropping whatever gets shared in there. And then I can just make either prefab variants or material variants or whatever have you, and put those into specialized content so that I know what actually happens. And when I need to change things for everyone, I change the shared version. And when I need to change the specialized stuff, I just change the specialized asset. Just trying to prevent losing work or duplicating the amount of work I have to do in the future when I'm working on these things. So yeah, that's my way to organize files. Assets by feature, code by domain.
So I've noticed recently that Ryder has been telling me that my namespaces need to be more. They don't need to be. He's just suggesting that I put my namespaces based on the folder structure that the scripts are in. And I've wondered about that because right now most of them are just like Infinity PBR namespace. So on the game modules, I'll go a little bit deeper. Infinity PBR modules, whatever it might be. is this like a best practice that Ryder is telling me I'm missing out on?
So specifically speaking, the way that it works is when you separate things by namespace, you can make them literal dependencies if you know that everything in this namespace does not need other namespaces. And then when you have a content piece, you know that it only relies on that one other namespace. You know that's a dependency. And Jason, would tell you specifically that you can make assembly definitions that are direct dependency orders. And then you know that your code is kept clean because the damage system doesn't need to know about bestiary for your one game mechanic. It helps you keep your code streaming in one way and not having everything tied together in a way that's really hard to find out what's affecting what.
So the matching to folders, though, is really common on web development and enterprise stuff. Like the folder structure generally matches and maps directly to the namespaces. I've never seen that be the case in Unity projects just because it's not just code, right? I think the big difference is on those, it's largely code.
In Unity packages, it's actually exactly that, because if you look at recent Unity packages, they don't even have a scripts folder. They have editor folder, runtime folder, and then under runtime, they'll have like this one feature and that other feature. For example, in UGUI, they have runtime, event systems, UI elements, and all those other things. And input system, they have packages for plugins, and then for UGUI, plugins for the event system, for multiplayer, it's a plugin, etc., etc. Things that are built on top of the base event input system.
I have a noobish question on namespaces. If we include the Infinity PBR in the top of the script, will it also include all the other Infinity PBR / whatever ABC /
Yes.
It will. Okay.
Wait, no.
It
will not include the children. No, he's asking if it will include the child namespaces. If you do if you do include Unity Engine, you don't get Unity Engine.ui. You have to add those independently.
So that was not
that's dependent on how you explicitly call namespace and what you write in there. So you could have a bazillion folders, but if they're all using namespace Infinity PBR, you're just going to have to type Infinity PBR, and that's it too.
So that's what when I think about my namespaces, that's what I've been trying to do is have them logical enough where if there is a larger system involved, like the game modules stats system, then it can have /game module /stats, because that is the stats system, and this has multiple things into it. But when it's just a more generic thing, like a character equip script, it's just one script. It just does this one thing. It's just so that's just Infinity PBR. I don't go to system / character equip, because I feel like that's complicating things that don't really need to be complicated.
Yeah, so generally you'll only have a namespace if you have multiple things that go under that namespace. Like the example with the damage I gave earlier, I had like 5 different components or classes related to it. If you only have one script, you'll usually just dump it into whatever the closest bucket for it is.
Makes sense.
Also, in Ryder's case, you can right-click the folders, the directories in the Solution Explorer, and I think it's under Properties. You can disable being a namespace provider, and it will stop harassing you about it. So just make sure you do that, so you don't accidentally let Ryder do it automatically for you.
So let's take another question about optimization. The question just says, this is a very generic question. What is the best way to optimize code? Any suggestion? You recommend doing it properly, improperly? What do you? No, let's say we got some just generic thoughts that might apply to everybody. I don't know. What do you guys got?
The first thing you want to do when you're optimizing for the best way is figuring out what's actually taking the most of your time. You don't pre-optimized code, that's the devil's call. You're going to spend a lot of time on things that you don't even know if you're going to use. You're never going to be a problem, and you're going to just sink your entire development into it. Don't
And
do
I've
that.
seen a lot of people do that. I don't want to interject, but I've seen a lot of people spend like weeks optimizing the crap out of something that was going to run once for like 10 minutes. Or that was never going to get anywhere near the scale that they were trying to optimize for, but they just got into this hole of just constantly optimizing this one little part of a project. And I've seen it it never ends up good. Continue on. So what do you do then?
Well, I mean, the first thing you do is you profile your code. You're letting it tell you explicitly, this is what's taking you the most time right now. This is where your time gets spent. Try to reduce that, and you'll get the biggest gains. And this lets you get the most bang for your buck, the most optimization for your time spent. So that's the first part. You find
And
out
that's
what's
with the
causing the
Unity
problem.
profiler, right? You just pop that
Yeah,
thing
the
open.
Unity profiler, whatever your IDE gives you, there are specialized tools to figure out what's taking the most memory and what's getting called the most times, how much time is spent on those calls. All of that is relevant information. And then once you have that, you're starting to see, well, what am I using there? Does it have better alternatives? Can I use those and see what happens? And don't assume, always benchmark. There are tools to benchmark different approaches. Specifically, there's a nugget package called Benchy that you can just make easy one-liner scripts, and you can let them run 1,000,000 times, and it will tell you how much time it took and how much memory it allocated and whatever else it needs. And then you can know what's going to run the fastest. And
Or you can just run
apply
again
that.
in the profiler a lot of the time and see
Yeah.
if you've solved it right. If it's a big enough, if it's not even close, like it went from 10 milliseconds to 1 millisecond, you've definitely improved it. Right? You can usually see that pretty quick in the profiler. Run it, fix it, run it again, and then benchmark for the stuff that's more, I think, close.
Yeah, and then we're just getting into the basics of things, but try to make sure you keep things on the stack and not going back to the heap and fetching things in memory the entire time that you're doing things. Try to not allocate memory per frame. That's going to end up with garbage collection, and garbage collection takes time. Try to not use for each loops because they do extra steps when you can use just a simple for loop at times. It depends on the data structure you're iterating, of course.
That's probably a bit of a micro optimization, though. At that point, going to
Yeah, but
from
I mean,
the 4 to
your
4.
IDE, the IDE lets you do that. The IDE does that for you, and if it's in the hot path, it actually does matter. For example, if you do for each, it has to get in a numerator, and that allocates an object. So you can just use a for loop to not need that, as an example. It got better recently. I think they let it become a struct. So
Yes. Yeah, they got rid of the GC problem related to that. But yeah, I think the bigger problems you're going to find in the profiler, though, are going to be 100 to 1,000 times that. Right, you're going to find big issues just by profiling, looking at the big spikes. You drag it over to the spike, go look at what the code that's running, and go, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Like, oh, why am I doing that here?
And one more thing is that you want to cache information that you calculated once, and you don't want to have to calculate it again. That's usually how most time gets spent. There was one talk that I don't remember the name of now, but there was one optimization specialist showing in 30 minutes how he managed to make one script 16 million times faster. Just by iterating on the optimizations and seeing the calculations and caching them and letting things not happen more than they need to.
Yeah, not redoing work. Do stuff once, don't do it again. Don't waste it. Don't waste work. And then profile is the number one thing out of everything that you can do. All of the other things are just a guess on whether or not they're going to impact your project. Without profiling, you're just kind of wildly, blindly guessing. And I mean, I've got another story on this. When I was first working at Sony, we were having a lot of performance problems. and nobody was at the time. Nobody was profiling it. Everybody was guessing, trying to figure out why things got bad in these situations and trying to fix the solutions. And everybody was submitting little things that would add like 1 or 2 frames a second in certain situations, but nobody was actually profiling. New guy came on, Jared, and he was junior dev at the time too. I think he might have been fresh out of college too. And his job was to profile the game and figure out what was wrong and see if he could find anything using VTune. I think it was VTune. It was Intel's new profiler that had just come out that worked with Unreal. So he went through, profiled the thing, and the issue, 0% related to anything that anybody had looked at. There was a problem in the UI code where it was doing like a couple million string compares per frame. Right? That was killing it. It was killing it. It was burning CPUs. It was doing all these string compares per frame to check to see what data to put into each UI element. He spent like 2 days refactoring it to enums, just like a real simple change, and the performance went, it like doubled frame rates overnight. Yeah. All from profiling. You can guess and optimize and micro optimize the shit out of stuff, go fix your shaders and all that other stuff. If the problem is that you're string comparing the UI, like, you're not going to find it until you actually profile and figure out the issue. Fix the real thing.
Yeah. On that note, Terraria also had a similar case where for a week, we started having we noticed that the game was slightly slower, all of us, without difference between who's running it, and we didn't know what's happening, but everyone was like, okay, yeah, we're going to open up a big project to refactor that one class that's probably really, really important, and we didn't profile, and I'm just like opening the profile, and I'm watching for like 1 minute, and I'm like, this isn't right. A small system that's meant to check that enemies are immune to damage from a specific projectile ended up running 2 million iterations per frame just to make sure that all the projectiles that aren't spawned are all hitting the enemies that aren't spawned on the different corner of the universe. Again, not spawned, just existent in memory. And that was like taking 3% of the entire game CPU time. And I'm like, maybe don't. And the entire thing just popped out of existence.
The first time I used the profiler effectively is also the first time that I learned you shouldn't do everything in the update loop. And now, I'm not embarrassed to say this because somewhere in the next month or two, it will be 10 years since I started using Unity, knowing nothing about any of this stuff. And one of the very first things I did not know how to do was use methods appropriately, or even know what exactly a method was, really, conceptually. And so I had an enemy script. Everything was going in the update loops, and everything was working fine. This is for the game The Barbarian, actually, to be fair. And then enemies were working, they were fine, and then I had more than 4 enemies on the screen at once, and frame rates tanked. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. So I learned how to use a profiler and found out that my enemy script, which had thousands of lines in the update loop, was taking up a ton of time. So I learned about using a profiler. Then I learned how to make methods more appropriately and to take things out of the update loop. And I went from being able to have 4 enemies on the screen to I don't know how many, because I had hundreds and it was fine. So yeah, the profiler, it's still hard to read. Somebody in the comments said they can't still read it. I still can't effectively read it all the way, but I know enough to be like, that's a big number, that's a big spike, let's dig into that and figure it out.
The profiler, I remember when it first came in there, this is awesome. I started using it, and I realized, kind of like you did, that I needed to not be doing all these things in update. Maybe I shouldn't find every enemy, every update loop in every other enemy, and that kind of stuff. Like, oh yeah, this is actually slow.
Yeah.
This is a problem. Yeah.
I learned some things where I was doing every frame. I was like, hey, I don't need to do this every frame. This can update every 3 seconds, and it's fine. It doesn't need to be every frame. So I learned to do things every 3 seconds when it didn't need to be every frame, and that of course saves how many frames? It's a lot.
Yeah.
Well, let's take this question about scroll views. It says, what's an elegant way to make a scroll view focus on a specific content element from a script?
Yeah, so when you're working with scroll view, what it's actually doing is it's offsetting the contents it has out of an anchor. And if you want to focus on a specific one, first off, the scroll view is supposed to give you a method for providing a normalized position to jump onto. But what you can also do is just straight up comparing the position of the anchor to the element, and doing that in local space with the transform inverse transform point. Just getting the position of the control panel and the element that you want, and setting the anchored position to that, and that should give you perfect focus on whatever you want. If you aren't comfortable with doing all of that, another thing you can do is you can add an empty child at the top and at the end of the scroll view, and you can get the normalized position of your element between those two using inverse lerp, which is a method in Unity that's super easy to use. And once you get that number, you just pop that into the scroll view method to set the position, and you're done. Yeah, I'm trying to look up what's the exact name of the methods I'm thinking about.
I think you've kind of nailed it, though. It's relatively simple. You got to move it up and down to the right spot. And there's, I forget the field on the scroll view too, like that percent or position across that you can set in the code. Yeah, you can just push that and set. Do you guys use the scroll view elements often and stuff? Is that something that you guys found is like something you're commonly putting into games? Mine is something I rarely ever need to use just because I don't do a lot of UI related things, but every now and then I got to jump in there.
I've used it for the loadings or the screen of all your saved games. You know,
Nice.
It's never fun to use for me. I haven't mastered that in any way, shape, or form. Every time I have to do it, I have to relearn how to do it. But that's the only use case I've ever had for it at this point, really.
Nice. All right, let me hit another one of these questions, unless you had more on the scroll view.
I just wanted to say that on scroll views, I tend to just look at them as, yeah, this forces positions into a certain limit for me, and that's all it does. Because in the end of the day, that's literally what it is. It comes with conveniences of having a scroll bar, but it's not doing anything beyond just moving the core content panel. And I'm not treating it as anything more than that. So if I need to, I just make my own. But if I don't, just let that happen. And I'm setting in whatever things I want. And if I need to, I just hack the position in, and I don't care. So there's that.
All right, I want to take this question here on modular stuff. But first, I wanted to just ask everybody to hit the thumbs up button if they haven't already. And if you have questions, drop them in chat. I'm trying to watch them. Pop-up questions. I got a bunch of them here, but we're looking at all of them. So if you got something interesting, just ask it in chat, and we will try to get to it. So this one was, if there were any do's and don'ts of making our code more modular. Are there any techniques or design patterns or something like that? We were talking a little bit about splitting up code in namespaces and how we separate things out. Do you guys have just any general rules, like simple tips or guidelines that you think just kind of apply?
A big don't is don't use patterns if you don't solve a problem with them.
That is a very good one.
Yeah. So just expanding on it a bit more. Patterns are known solutions, known to common problems. So if you have a problem, a pattern can be applied to it, but don't use a pattern you saw without having any problem to solve with it. You're just going to add extra steps to what you're trying to make and lose a lot of time. So that's just the one thing I'll immediately say as a don't. In terms of do, in trying to keep your code clean, try to figure out what scripts you're accessing together a lot, and then just try to bundle them together. Because what's happening when you're spending time hopping around is that you're not gaining any value. And if you're making things easier to access and find, then you're going to reduce the amount of time wasted trying to make what you're trying to make.
And what about you, Andrew?
So
I got to pop the actual question back up
yeah,
here, but
I'm
any tips on
doing.
modularity?
I'm trying to be better at this. Last night, as an example, I was doing. I forget the exact thing I was doing, but I was adding something to a script that I was like, well, I'm probably going to end up adding this to multiple scripts, and I was about to create this one little thing in its own static method that I could just reference, and then I thought it's not that big, it's not that important, so I just didn't. Um, because I want to be better at separating these things out. But I also don't want to waste my time by separating things out that I'm really going to use once or twice, and then it's just going to be there, and I'm never going to pick it up again. So in that case, I just didn't do it because I didn't want to. I felt it wasn't worth the time. But I am trying to make things more modular to where I can just link into them from multiple places without worrying about it, and then only having one place to update when I need to update something on that system.
In regards to general techniques, do look up the solid principles if you haven't. This is about keeping your code modular and flexible for change on an industrial scale when it's needed. So when we're talking about modularity, specifically, it's just taking out a piece of code that's in one place and making sure it can be used anywhere or replaced with anything. And those tend to fall under the interface segregation, where you just need something that does stuff, and there's a contract that says this thing does the stuff you want, and then you can replace it with anything. Just make sure there's an actual spot to replace, and then make sure it's not tightly coupling like everything together. It's not that, a gun needs an arm to hold it, and the arm needs to know there's a gun so it can shoot the gun, etc., etc. You don't want that, because even if you make all the plugging points, if everything needs a specific other thing, then you've failed. So yeah, just keep an eye out for how easy is it to replace what you have. If it's not easy, then it's not modular, and then you can make it easy, therefore making it modular. Not that everything needs to be modular, though. Just keep an eye out for that. Don't waste time adding needless modularity.
That's what I was going to jump in and with a don't is a lot of the time when I see people making things modular, it's because of their maybe one days, like they got these ideas, or maybe one day we'll want to add this thing in, or we'll want our characters to climb up trees and shoot arrows at boats from the trees. So we'll make it so that their movement can be swapped to tree climbing as well, and that arrows like you can definitely go way overboard on the modularity. I wouldn't worry about making it necessarily more modular. Just make sure that the modularity is at the right spots. So like with the places that you actually where it makes sense to swap things and replace them and change them. If it doesn't make sense, then don't go over complicating things. I think a lot of time people learn about modular code and patterns and just general code practices, and they start wanting to implement them thinking it's going to make things easier and better. But I think I was mentioning this a little bit before the show. As I get older and better at code, I find that my code gets generally simpler and simpler. I jump to abstractions later than earlier and try to make those big decisions for the code structure at the last possible second, I guess, like to kind of like make the decisions late and don't pre-plan for maybe I'll need to do this thing. If I need to do it, then I'll code it and I'll know how it should look then. I don't, when I pre-code the things and try to pre-modularize things, I don't know what it's actually going to look like. And I end up making mistakes, and then you end up coding the other system badly or not optimally so that it fits into these other presumptions that you made. So watch out for that. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention was if your code is starting to get long, if you're getting class files that are 200-300 lines long, and you have a lot of them, and there are lots of, maybe they're getting much longer than that, and that's regular, then you definitely should be splitting things out more. You should be shrinking down the scripts to do the main thing that they should do. Occasionally you'll have one or two scripts that are just bigger, right? But majority of the scripts should be doing small things. And if they're not, there probably are multiple scripts just kind of squished into one that could be split out. You're probably adding things into like your character controller or your interactable object script that probably should be a separate script, just because that's the easiest place to put them in. And that's where you should probably make it a little bit more modular so that you can extend those things out without adding to those other scripts.
Yeah, so that was the solid principles first letter, single responsibility. And if you haven't read the rest, then you probably should. It's the best thing to recommend in this regard. Also, in regards to changing your code, this is actually what most of us here do, is that we write the code as simple as it needs to be, and if it has new requirements, we go and change it, we refactor it, so that we know, the player uses a gun, but now the player wants to use a sword and maybe a potion, so we don't start coding everything for that. We say the player can use items, and then we make the concept of an item, and we make all the other things plug into that. And this lets us make the code modular on demand, not before it's necessary. Just make the code easy to extract out and replace the functionality there. And
yeah, and you might even start with an interface there before you go to an item like an iUsable, until you realize that, okay, these are actually all going to share some actual data and some code too, not just an interface, which is probably the case, but depending on how you scale it up and how fast you're adding things and what you already know about what you're going to add, you can go anywhere along there. That is some good advice. Is there another question that you guys wanted to take? There are a lot of them in here, and I've got a bunch of them starred, but if there's anything that's popped up that you guys are really curious about, I want to take this multiplayer one, but then maybe we can jump over to one of the other ones. If you guys got anything? So this one was just about if we have any ideas on how to start a multiplayer project so to be compatible with Unity's current development for multiplayer, Photon or something else. I wanted to take this because GDC, Unity is doing a bunch of announcements. I would wait and see if they do any announcements around the multiplayer stuff. I don't know exactly what they're doing, but they have the whole new multiplayer system that's been going on. So we'll wait and see if they have anything, because that's literally this week. I think it's probably like tomorrow is the talks where they're talking about what's going on with Unity. It'll be throughout the week, so I would watch that. Photon, though, is definitely a solid option for just getting a game up and running now. It's been around for like 10, 15, I don't know, it's a long time. They're still going strong and still growing. So if you just need something that you need to use right away and jump into, I think that that's a very solid option, something I would probably just use instead of waiting around. But if you're curious about the Unity one, I would look and see maybe they'll announce something at GDC this week. I don't know for sure that they will, but that's why I'm waiting and hoping.
Yeah, so beyond GDC, there's also Unity Unite, and I think that's next month. I might be wrong. But regarding how to start a Unity multiplayer project that will be compatible with Unity's current development for multiplayer, if I understand the question in a different way, there's actually the Unity ML API and the Unity networking that they're working on. So usually it's really difficult to replace what networking solution you use after you start, but there are points of extraction that you can make. Specifically speaking, usually it's separated into what transport layer are you using for transferring the actual data from point A to point B, people, machines wise. And then there's the actual, once you got the bytes of data, how are they propagated into your game objects and whatnot. In the case of Photon, it handles both of them for you. It transports through to the Photon cloud, finds whoever you're matched with and sends that to them. They get it, download it, and Photon has Photon View components and its own hooks that it will call code from to let things get the data and use it. So it handles both layers for you. You don't really have much that you can extract out and replace it later in terms of compatibility. If you're actually just trying to choose a solution, Photon is amazing for it. Dark Rift 2 is also supposedly really good on the asset store. ML API, I have a few grudges with, so I won't go too much into that. Mirror is also supposed to be a solid choice for beginners to go with. And it's supposedly scaling really well. The developer is really dedicated. And they also have a dots solution for it on the asset store. Yeah, I would say just Photon is the most convenient option. It has the most examples online.
Yeah, it's generally where I'd recommend going, like I said, unless you want to get into the new Unity game object multiplayer thing that they're working on. So if you want to wait for that, yeah, see if they do something next week. But Photon is generally where I would go. Andrew, are you doing any multiplayer stuff for your game? No,
Staying
keeping it
far
single
away.
player. That's my recommendation too. I prefer to just build well, unless I have a really good multiplayer game idea, but just making it multiplayer for the sake of multiplayer isn't something that I like to do anymore. Something
So
I used to.
I have fantasies of including an option that's not really multiplayer, but more like a watcher mode where you could share like some key or something with somebody who has the game, and they can basically watch you play without actually. There's no real, and maybe there's light interaction, like they can like send you messages or chat, but not they don't control anything. Maybe they have their own character that they can walk around, but it's not part of your game. It's just more they're kind of watching you and participating that way, in a way that isn't so much multiplayer, but just like I'm hanging out with you while you play this game, and I can do more than just watch you play. And now I can like move around the world myself, see the action a little bit, and whatnot. I'm thinking about that, but that's future stuff and not important. I'm not focused on multiplayer. Sounds scary.
All right, so there was a question your eye popped up. Do you want to? I'm trying to find it in the chat so I can.
It's a bit down. I've scrolled quite a bit down. Sorry.
It's all good. You want to just say what the question is, and we'll talk about it. So
iDerp asks, how do you handle hitboxes and hurtboxes? They seem very complicated, and I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around them. So I just wanted to answer that. And in the simplest sense of things, you're just trying to say, hey, something hit another thing. And how you choose to do that can be entirely made up. You don't have to actually use hitboxes and hurtboxes. Those concepts are constructs made for more intricate games around the fighter genre. They are used everywhere else sometimes, but they don't have to be. Now, if you're trying to make it simpler for you, a hurtbox will obviously just be something that gets hurt, something that other things can hit, and a hitbox can only hit other things, it cannot be hurt. You can very easily set it up in Unity's physics and layers and tags. What was it? The
is that physics collision matrix thing?
Yeah, exactly. You can very easily set it up so that hitboxes can only interact with hurtboxes and not the other way. And generally speaking, they'll always hurtboxes would be non-triggers and hitboxes will be triggers, because a hitbox wouldn't try to not push other things. It's just detecting hits. You could also just use raw collision checks. And all you're trying to say is, in this area, if there's anything that I can hurt it. That's literally the end of it. There's nothing to complicate here. In terms of processing, what you should actually harm when you hit, for example, if you have an area with both an ally and an enemy, and you're trying to find the hurt boxes and saying, yeah, I hit two things, how do I know which one I'm attacking? That's an entirely different question, and just about processing what you hit. Which
talk a little bit about the different, I guess, like the two different types of hits that they might be considering. I can think of two like really common ones. There's hitting things with a sword, might be one of the types of hits that they're trying to figure out how to do. The other would be like shooting at something. So they're they got maybe like let's go with like a realistic FPS if they want to shoot at something. Those are usually when people talk about hitboxes, they're trying to solve one of those two types of things. Sometimes other stuff, but give a quick example of how you would like solve each of those. Just like
I'm an outlier here, but yeah. Yeah, so just talking in the simplest sense, the most common solution that you'll find on YouTube, for example, for realistic FPSs is the raycast, the humble physics.raycast method that says, from this position at this angle, shoot a ray. If it hits anything, give it to me. And then when you get that, if you are using a weapon that can harm things, just check if they can be harmed, call the harm method. If they are something that you can heal and you're using a healing ability, then just check if they can be healed, call the heal method, etc., etc. That's usually just a raycast is giving you a collider. From the collider, you get a component that says damage taker, and that damage taker can take damage with amount.
And you can get multiple things back. You can do a raycast all and get back a bunch of colliders if there are multiple things there.
Yeah, and you can also do sphere cast, capsule cast. There's a bunch of methods in the physics class that you can use. You can also just have a trigger that you can spawn, and it can just check its entire area and do whatever you want. And then you can have it in any shape that you desire. It can be a swirl, it can be a cone, it can be whatever else. Beyond that, for swords, you'd usually just drop a collider on the sword itself, and then as it swings, it will pass through objects. One thing that you should watch out when you do that is collisions that are discrete versus dynamic, which basically when you have a moving object in the simulation for physics, it relies on the physics step. But when you're animating something, you're setting its position directly. Therefore, you're ignoring the physics. Unity actually has an animator field in the inspector to say animate physics, so that it's going to be a bit more accurate in that regard. But generally speaking, object moves, detects that it's in something, do the exact same process of checking if it can be harmed, harm it, if it can be healed, heal it, etc., etc. In terms of trying to keep it simple, usually people will try to rely on tags if they really don't care, if there isn't a lot of complexity in the game. If there is more complexity, then you're going to want components that have special features, and then something that does a finer scan. For example, taking a game like League of Legends and shooting an ability, it's going to say, yeah, I hit a collider here. Is it a minion? It's probably got a minion component or something that identifies it as such. If it can take damage, then just get its damage. If it has a team, make sure it's an opposing team and not my team, so that I don't hurt my allies. Or if I'm debuffed in a way that I can hurt my allies, allow it, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I'd do something like a can hit and then take hit if they can, right? There's some sort of an interface on there. Or
take hit will just let you pass damage, and can hit would actually query all the logical things of, should this thing that I found can take damage from me?
Yeah, like is it an ally, is it invulnerable, or some other thing, return back a false. And then the take hit could take the damage, it could even take in the thing hitting it if it's got some extra data or some other data structure, like 10 fire damage or whatever the thing is. So lots of ways to do it, but that's one of those things that also like used to be confusing and complicated, and now like kind of comes naturally. Like, oh yeah, that's an easy one. Like think about it back in the day. Like that was a tough one at first. Like, how does a hitbox actually work?
Yeah, and just to keep it a bit more tight to the answer, Unity has the simulation objects, which are just the physical capsule colliders and all of those that you see, and the trigger colliders and rigid bodies. That's all one part. The other part is direct scans via physics.raycast, physics.overlapsphere, physics.capsulecast. Those are not objects in the scene. They're just checking the current state of the scene for you. There's a big difference in terms of how immediate and convenient they are, because you can't spawn a collider and expect that it has results immediately. That takes one physics step minimum to apply and be queryable. But being persistent, it lets you see that in the inspector easily. So do with that what you will.
I faced a big issue with that, with the barbarian on the sword. You mentioned the swords and having to, what I found was the sword might be here and might be here and then here the next frame, and it didn't actually go through my head because it was never here.
Yep.
So the solution there, and I don't know, there might be an easier solution, maybe now, maybe then, that I just didn't know about. But I ended up doing ray casts from the tip. I would have a little empty game object on the tip and on the base of where the hittable area, because sometimes the weapons were short, sometimes they were long, so it couldn't be the same length. And there's basically they cache their last frame, and then their current frame, and do a ray cast from the two. And if the bad guy was in between there, it would trigger the hit.
Yeah, so that's a very common solution, and it's nice enough when you want ultra accurate scans. There is a better one. Specifically, rigid bodies have a sweep test method that lets you actually sweep the entire rigid body, whatever shape it has, and you get the exact results, but without missing certain points if it's like a really small hit or the raycast would miss. So sweep test is the preferred method of moving things in the scene and checking those queries. There is also sweep test all, which exactly as you expect, just sweeps everything regardless of if it finds any hit. And I just want to make sure that people remember that even if you wanted the most accurate physics simulation ever, it's not going to make the best game ever. What you actually want is hits that feel good. And for that, sometimes games will flub their physics boxes. In Dark Souls and Elden Ring specifically, you can find loads of debug videos where they show that when you swing a sword, there's actually like a 2-meter capsule swinging, becoming active and swinging for you. Also, those games have slower hitbox movements so that they won't miss anything from the animation. So that's something that I find funny about that.
Yeah, his audio is now fully out.
Yeah, he's gone. We lost TRI's audio.
No.
Oh, you're back. It might have just been too far from the mic.
I think it's one of the things I'm happy about with the game I'm working on now is I don't have to do those things. Since there is no player per se, it's just a capsule and this with a camera on it. I don't have to worry about did the sword physically go through the bad guy. But that sweep test, I don't know if that was available, 7 years ago or so when I was making it. But that sounds fancy.
Yep, have to use this.
Yep. This is the thing. You know, new things are added all the time. You got to stay up on all the latest stuff.
That's why you got to come out here so you can find out about the latest stuff, right?
It's true. That's why you every week.
Every week. All right. I wanted to take another question, but I wanted to first mention our giveaway and a couple other things. So in just a little while, we'll kick off the giveaway to give out a writer license. It's a 1-year writer license to give us free to give away to a random watcher. So just be in chat and be ready to pick your battle race and class, and we'll start off the fight in like a half an hour or so. You can win that. And also let's take this question and then I'll talk about the part that's kind of related. It says, hey guys, where should I go to gather more people to collab on my game, especially programmers and artists? Those designers tend to be pretty easy to find, to be honest. I go through the unit. Well, they want to design their own game though, right? That's the thing. They all want that's finding designers that want to make your game is a bit harder. This is, I go through the Unity Discord forums and some IGD groups, but only get musicians. So they're looking for people to collaborate on their games and ways to find people to collaborate on their games. And I wanted to, I guess, just give my quick list of places and then plug something as well. The normal places that I go to are now like ex-coworkers, friends, people that I've talked to in the past. And then I'll obviously start reaching out. But for people who don't already know a bunch of other game developers, my recommendations are Discord servers, of course. I think that they're relatively good, and forums, the Unity forums specifically, which I think you're already kind of covering. Game jams tend to be good if you're actively talking to people and doing. If you're just submitting stuff, throwing it out there into the game jam, you're not going to be meeting new people. The other thing that is now an option and hasn't been for a while are the meetups and user groups. Those are really starting to kind of kick back up in person, where you can go meet with other game developers that are kind of at all different levels, watch some little talk, somebody up there giving a session about how to do something game related, but most importantly, just kind of meet other developers at a place. Most of the time when I go to meetups, it's 15 to 50 people there, and you can just hang out, chat, eat some pizza, talk to other developers, and start to make friends and contacts. That's like where I met Dave. I mean, you meet a lot of people going to these things. I met a lot of people at GameDev events, and there are a lot of them starting to kind of kick off again. GDC's coming up next week. Obviously, not an option for most people because it's huge travel and all that stuff. And then the thing I wanted to plug was I've got two things. One, mastermind groups that have been setting up for free for everybody. So if you're interested in that, go to game.courses/mm, check it out, see if it's something you're into. If so, I'll try to get you into one of the groups. It's not exactly what you're looking for, but it's a way to start kind of growing your network a bit. And the other thing is the Game Dev Guild conference that I'm putting on in 2 months. We'll have a lot of more community stuff and matchmaking to kind of get people together. I want to try to replicate a lot of the in-person stuff with the online part so that it's really easy to get people that aren't very sociable and used to just going out and saying hello to people in talking with others. So that's kind of one of the key goals. So check out gamedevguild.com for that. But those are kind of the main things. My biggest one, though, is just look at meetup.com, look at the meetups around you in the area, and start going to talk to those people, because then you'll actually be talking to game developers in person and kind of building up, I think, slightly closer relationships. And then if they don't end up working on it, they may end up knowing somebody or introducing you to the people who end up working on your project. It happens all the time too. So those are my thoughts. What about you guys? You got any ideas on where to just meet programmers and artists?
So I just want to prefix this by saying that most programmers and artists got into this industry because they wanted to make stuff and they already have their own ideas. So when you're looking to collab, you actually have to show them that you can provide them value in some way. The most easy way to pair up with other people, for my own experience, was game jams and trying to group up before or as soon as they start, because that's when people are looking to make the most mile for the time they have. And that depends on which game jam it is, but usually they'll have a community that you can just jump into, and they might even have readily available matchmaking for groups. You can say, this is my role, I am good at X and I'm interested in making Y, and then other people can just hop in and join on your team, and you can share information like that. I think Game Maker's Toolkit had the biggest jam of last year or something like that, and it had an online tool for people to group up to make games together with the time they had. So that's a really good way to make new friends to collab with.
Yeah, Bracky's had a giant game jam recently too.
Yeah.
They have a huge Discord server. Go ahead, Andrew.
Game jams are great. I think one of the things that you're right to your point on people. Everyone wants to make their own things, so they're already working on their own things. That's totally true. And I think one of the things that you want to avoid coming across as looking for is somebody to do things for you. I'm working on my game and I need an artist to make a character for my game. Okay, but really, are you looking for someone to make that for your game, in which case you should pay them? Or are you looking for someone to join you on a project and work on our game together? And in that case, you're going to need to find somebody who's very much like you, who's willing and eager to work in a team of people, to give and take on the ideas, to not have necessarily one person dictating what everyone's doing, because that's called a manager and now you have a job. And instead, I think that's where the game jams make sense, because you're going to find people who are just looking to make cool stuff. And what you're really trying to find is friends. You're trying to make friends with people to work on stuff together where you can trust them to do their part, to not cause problems, to not do all this that's going to derail your project 2 months from now, because that is going to happen. I mean, I don't know how many projects are started, but the vast majority are not finished for a variety of reasons. And if you can avoid that by not bringing on somebody that you don't really know, or by finding people quickly because you're doing it the right way, or presenting yourself as, not somebody who's just looking to get free labor, that would be helpful.
You definitely have to be able to contribute too, because it's very difficult to get people to build a game for you when you're just the idea person. Lots of people want to be that. Everybody's got ideas, and there are way more people with ideas than people who have time to code them or build the art for them. So yeah, you got to make sure that you can do some of the jobs or do a little bit of everything, ideally, if you want to build up a full team. Okay, so here is a question that I think is relatively easy for us to answer. It was, what is the most performant way of differing objects, tags, components, or names, or object references?
It's all loaded.
Yes. So in general, it doesn't really matter. I would say that most of the time, if you're comparing objects, it doesn't really matter. Making a get component call isn't the most performant. There's, if you're going to be doing it regularly, like checking to see if it has a component on it, but it's not going to be anything that you're going to notice probably in any of the ways that you differ objects, unless you're doing massive amounts, in which case you probably want to profile and realistically you probably want to figure out why you're doing massive amounts of object diffs.
So that's exactly right on the mark. But let's approach it in the more scientific way. When you're asking how to differ something, you want to make and you're caring about performance, so we assume you want the shortest available check to say, yep, this is the one I'm looking for. The first thing to do is to just cache them, and then you already have them differed, readily available, and you don't even have to ask.
For the straight object reference, right? Or you're just checking the pointer, and this object is that object, same point in memory.
Yeah, or lists of them if they're grouped or whatever. Because tags and components are things that would be shared like that.
Comparing a set of references.
Yeah, beyond that, if you are caching, you can also, and you don't want direct references, you can also use the object's runtime ID. Each one has that. I forgot the exact name of the field. It's something really easy to look up.
It changes randomly, though. It's the one that people occasionally try to use to persist and then learn, oh, wait, this is different now. What happened? All my stuff changed.
It's just the runtime instance ID of the object. You can just cache that. It's a simple int. Just for bytes of comparison. Beyond that, if you're actually looking at tags and components are lists of things that are available on the object. So when you're trying to ask, does this have the component, it has to iterate everything and get you that one component. And it also has to do type checks to make sure that it's the right one. So it's not exactly fast. Tags are string comparisons, but Unity optimized them a lot, and there's actually a specialized method called compare tag, which is more efficient than checking the tag string comparison. So use compare tag if you can, if you're using tags. As for what you get the most mileage out of, components 100%, because components will let you check by pieces, whereas you can only have one tag per game object.
I think that pretty much covers it. Let's see. Are there any other interesting questions? I mean, there are lots of questions in here, but I don't know if there are any that I want to make sure to pop up. I've got a bunch of pinned ones and then other ones. Let's take this one. This was an earlier one that came in. So what knowledge level is required to actually start working? This is something that I was asked recently by actually two different people who are looking at getting into the industry that are both are just kind of getting out of school, one out of college and one out of high school. And they're wondering what they need to get started. One's wondering, like, do I need to go get a degree? The other's like, oh, can I got a degree. Now what do I do? Now what do I need? And really, in my opinion, the level of knowledge required, it's going to vary dramatically. Like you could be really new and still get a job as long as you just make the right moves and have the right contacts, know the right people, and then you can be really great and still never get a job if you're just terrible at actually applying. So when it comes to working, you just need to be able to get, I guess, the bare minimum done. Let's rewind this a second, because I want to talk about this at like a junior developer level. So let's say you're coming in, you've never worked as a game developer before, and you can kind of write a little bit of code. You can fix bugs in some issue. Like you get a project and you can kind of loosely figure out some of the simple bugs. If you're at that point, you're probably good enough to get in as a junior developer, probably qualified. I don't expect anybody who's like starting off as a brand new developer in this would be in a bigger place to really know how to make something brand new from scratch at full scale. If you can, it's a huge boost and you're going to have much easier time getting the job. But I think that just getting in, like, people overestimate drastically how much experience and skill they need. I don't know how many times I've started new jobs thinking like I was going to go in and be completely lost and overwhelmed and stuff, not have any idea what to do, and then realize like, oh, okay, I know a lot of things that I didn't realize I knew, and I'm able to get a lot more done than I thought I could. So I don't know if I'm answering the question at all, but I would say the level of knowledge is just enough that you can accomplish simple tasks. If you can get a task of, hey, this character can't move, see if you can figure out why and go fix it. And it's not some crazy complex project. It's a medium-sized project and you can do it. Or you can add in some little system. They're like, hey, we have this little RPG and we need a set of collectibles, and we have this loose collectible system, but now we need to add in some new collectibles, and your job is to go extend this collectible system and like add in a new type of collectible. If you feel like you could probably do that, then you're more than qualified to get in as a junior developer, at least. And in my experience, I would just start applying. Like, just try to do as much as you can and start. Don't wait until you feel ready, because you're never gonna feel, by the time you feel qualified and ready to do the job, it's like you'll be at the point where you've out leveled that job. You probably lose interest in it, and you're looking at other jobs that you now feel that same way about. So get in there, and if you can't get in on just straight programming or something else, get into the industry in some other position and transition over. It's much easier once you're in a company to switch roles than it is to get into a company. Those are my thoughts.
On my own end, the level of knowledge is going to be a bit of a funny answer, but none. What you actually need is the confidence in your ability to fulfill the task that you're asked for, to work, because work needs people to do stuff, and you aren't expected to know everything in the world ever just to begin working. It depends on the job, and for some jobs, you literally cannot have the knowledge level that you think you need. For example, if you look at Unity and Unreal, sure, they're public game engines, but there are a bunch of proprietary game engines that you've never seen before, would never know the structure of, and have no knowledge in. You just need the ability to say, yeah, I can do that for you if I get the proper training on it or whatever. Usually it wouldn't even be that bad if the tasks you're asked to do are simple. It's probably something that in one day someone can tutor you on how to do, and then you can start working. So your ability to learn is more important than the level of knowledge that you have at any given point in time.
And willingness to learn, to get out there and go figure it out, and not just say, I don't know how to do that, I give up. I'm not doing anything until somebody tells me how.
Yeah, and beyond that, when you're working, if you're ever getting a programmer job, you're going to end up in a situation that nobody trained you for a specific problem you've never had, and you're going to have to learn it on the fly. The level of knowledge you have at a point in time is not going to be the determining factor on whether you're getting hired, ever. It's your ability to adapt to things that happen that nobody could have trained for.
Yeah, I don't think I knew how to do any of the things that I did at my first game programming job before I got there. At least none of the actual like tasks that I was given. I knew some of the basics. Then I get these tasks like I don't have the slightest clue how to even start that. Like day one, I got a task like that. They're like, hey, yeah, we need multiple databases and a system now to manage our content between the two databases. Can you come up with something and build that real quick? I'm like, what? Like I just started. I'm trying to figure out how to build the game. Still trying to figure out Perforce, but okay. You just got to jump in there and do your best, you know.
Yeah. Also for William Crandall, I just want to say that I do love speaking, but it's more that I am extremely tired. I've been up for like 20 something hours and I'm just trying to stay awake. But the talk is really interesting. I'm sorry if I'm looking anything else. It's really just the body trying to shut down and I'm trying to tell it not to.
Yeah, that's why you need just cans and cans of liquid caffeine.
I don't drink any of that.
Oh, then you definitely don't need it. It's a terrible addiction and you should avoid it.
Plus, if you don't drink any of it, it will really affect you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a product of not having a beard.
Oh, it's when you start drinking it that the beard appears. It's gross. It's actually beard grow potion. All right. So, do you guys want to take another question, or did you have some thoughts on that, Andrew, on getting into the industry?
Well, the only thought I had is 0 because if you're doing your own thing, you don't need any experience, and that's the beauty. There are some things in this world that you need to learn before you can do. You need to learn like some experience level. There are other things that seem to be like an innate ability, even though it likely came with a lot of practice and learning. But some people are better at art. You know, their hands just work better when they're a 4-year-old than other 4-year-olds. And they've got these innate abilities to do things better. But when it comes to this stuff, you don't need to have any knowledge. You just need to want to do it and then learn. And there's enough tools out there to get you to a point where, you know, if you're doing your own thing before you get that job, you can get to that level without having to go to school, without having to, you know, know anything.
That said, just to clarify, you should have some game development experience before you're applying for the jobs. Like,
yes.
You should actually be building some games on your own at least and learning that stuff. You should be doing something. Don't just go in there like, I've never opened an engine and I'd like a job. Will you teach me? Because that's not going to happen. You're going to have to, you know, learn enough on your own to be proficient beforehand. But that's definitely doable. I like the comment 01 had. I got a job that required UE and or Unreal Engine essentially, and told them to give me 2 days to learn. And I think that's what everybody kind of does. If you get a new job at a game company, not necessarily you learn Unreal in 2 days, but whatever tools they're using before you start the job, you usually will dive in and spend as much time as possible getting comfortable with them. So that way, when you start on day one, you're like, I feel much more at ease and better with this than if I go in like, wait, which one is Unreal? What's the icon look like? Or, you know, whatever the case. You want to make sure that you're practicing with it, whether it's some tool or a game engine, or if it's just, this is one of the most important ones. If you're going to work on a game and it's a game company, play the damn game, understand it so you can talk about it. And when they're asking you questions, you have some context and know like why they're asking you how you would do the system, because that's part of the game. Like, you should know these things. Definitely play the games for companies that you apply to work on.
Yeah.
Also, one thing about playing the damn game, just be sure to not mock people if they don't know the game as well as you, because people have different jobs in the company and they might not need to know the game to do their job, and that's not something they should be judged on.
I know a lot of artists who never played our games. Like, they logged in, looked at the characters, didn't play them. They didn't even like playing those kind of games. They just like making art. Like,
the one thing that, especially in Terraria's case, whenever we're talking to anyone, we're not expecting everybody to know the current state of everything because we have 5,000 items. It literally is too difficult to know everything about the game at this point. Even I, by the way, I didn't know some things that were like balanced for like a whole year because it happened without me being involved in the task. And I didn't get to reach that part of content in my gameplay within that year. So just take that with a grain of salt.
All right, let's take this question. And it's a kind of a funny one, but interesting. I think it highlights another point I want to talk about, though. It says, should I still be applying to senior jobs, hoping it opens doors to other positions? And here I think the scenario is more like applying to jobs that you feel are kind of outside of your skill level. Now, if you're a junior developer, no experience, don't apply for senior jobs. They're gonna ignore it, right? But if you're a junior developer and the job doesn't say junior, it just says, programmer, developer, game designer, whatever it is, apply for those. Don't not apply because it doesn't say like junior or no experience required. Even if it says like, we require 1 or 2 years and we would ideally like to see a shipped title, still apply, because the worst thing you can do is throw your resume away and not look at it, not call you. There's not a lot of harm in trying, and you may find that whatever things you have or show, especially on your portfolio, if you have one, may still kind of push you beyond that. And I find that a lot of times I've talked about this before, but with job postings in general, the requirements and the way that they're worded and set up is always multiple levels above what the actual position is. It's always like, hey, we're hiring, Elon Musk to run our Walmart store, like to run our gas station. We're running a gas station. We need you to have, you've been CEO of multiple big startups, and it happens a lot. The requirements get inflated. So senior position as a junior, no, but a regular position as a junior where it says maybe you need a little bit of experience and you don't have that professionally, it still apply.
Yeah, I would just, I know my situation is somewhat unique, but I got my current role 5 years ago at GDC. I saw a job opening and I said to myself, that sounds fun. I'm not qualified for that, but I think I'm qualified for something. And so I literally applied for a job I knew I was not qualified for, wrote a letter saying, I'm not qualified for this job, but I do this, 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 and I know this and this, and I think I could be a good person on your team. I got the interview because of that letter, essentially. It got my resume past what would have otherwise been a hard no. And I got an interview where I was able to talk my way into a job, basically, and a role was created in order for me to help out on the team, and that worked out. So sometimes I had no experience to think of. I never had a corporate job before, so I was not a top pick on paper. But I think in all these things, you just have to put yourself out there and talk to people, and show them that you're willing to learn, that you've got some experience and some background that's unique and for the role or for the team or for the company, and put yourself out there and accept that you might hear no a lot. All you need to hear is yes once, and you're okay.
Yeah, it just takes it's the effort part, I think, that really pushes it over, right? If you get out there and kind of push yourself kind of over the edge, like you said, with that letter, or I've done it's funny, I've done the exact same kinds of things. If I really want some position somewhere, I am not going to just submit a resume. I'm going to submit a resume, try to make friends with whoever the hiring manager is somewhere, or contact them somewhere if I can in a friendly. I'm going to work my ass off to try to get in there and impress them, right? It's kind of the goal. And I think that's very, very good advice, especially if your resume isn't going to just do that on its own. If you've got 5 people applying and one of them is trying hard to impress you, and actually you can tell they really want the job and the other 4 aren't, it's a boost, right?
Yeah, so just on the level of hoping to get other positions is one thing, but just going to apply to other jobs will get you experience regardless, and you can get better at trying to get the job. There's this one recommendation we had a few GameDev shows back, where you should not apply to the job that you really, really want first, because you will not have enough experience to do it competently in a way that you'll be happy with. So you can treat any attempt to getting a job as XP grinding for the one that you actually want to get in the end.
They're like little daily quests of going on the interviews that you're less interested in, and won't be devastated that you don't get, kind of power up that skill. I have to do that. I'm terrible at interviewing, so It was definitely a useful thing for me. All right. There was a question about C# and Unity, and jump onto a slightly technical one. This isn't that technical, but it's just, I know that knowing C# can help have a better understanding of Unity, but if your goal is to work in Unity, should you start with C# or Unity? So here they're talking about, when people talk about start with C#, it either means like they're making a console app, a web app, or a desktop app. Those are really your options, unless they're doing some weird firmware stuff or something else that I don't know about. But those are probably the three options. And in reality, they're probably not actually making any app. They're probably just going through tutorials and learning the basics. If they're trying to get into Unity, they don't have a thing that they want to build, and they just want to learn C#. And personally, I would recommend going straight to Unity for the sole reason that it's going to give you projects to build. It's going to give you things to work on and learn and kind of drive that motivation. If you can just get into C# and just work on algorithms and learning that stuff, and the learning part is super fun without having a project and it keeps you motivated, cool. But if not, you're going to need something. And if you're doing web, if you're a web developer, you do web projects. You come up with this idea for a thing that you want to make and you make it. Or you make like a bot for some Discord server if you're making a console app, or whatever the thing is. Unity, I think, gives you the project and kind of the target for the things that you need to learn. And you'll learn the C# stuff along the way. I do think that there's some benefit once you're loosely familiar and kind of understand the language and the coding, though, of going through and learning some of the C# fundamentals, do some console apps, do a little web app, and see how that's different, see how the things work out. And then it'll really kind of expand your understanding of the language and programming in general. But I would start in Unity. I'm going to shut up now.
You're just ruining all my childhood joys of making a console game. I mean, a C#. I'm making a C# console game, not the PlayStations and the Xboxes and all that. Just
you want a main console window.
Yeah, Snake and all that.
Yeah.
My own opinion is that you should definitely start with just C#, and my reasoning for it is that it's the fundamentals. When you're working with Unity, you're working with Unity and C#, and eventually you're going to need the knowledge that you get from working on pure C# when working with Unity, unless you're purely a game designer with a bit of content implementation. But if the goal is working with Unity and you're not trying to be a programmer, then yeah, sure, just go for Unity. You get the projects with all the bells and whistles and VFX and sounds and all that. But if you're trying to actually make something on a level of pure control and being able to exact your vision, you need to know how to do the step-by-step of the logical stuff. And for working on pure logic, C# is where you do that. You can make you won't get all the bells and whistles of Unity, but you can still make games and have fun with it, just by sheer merit of a black and white console, or even color the text if you are adventurous. But the more important thing is understanding what you're doing if you're trying to be a programmer. If you're not trying to be a programmer, just go straight to Unity and you'll get almost everything you need from the editor.
What do you think of the scenario, though, where they get in and they learn some C#? Maybe they spend a month or two learning C#, getting the fundamentals down. They build a console app, and then they get into Unity, and suddenly there's a bunch of magic, right? Like, all of a sudden there's a start method, and then there's an update, and there's no more main, and everything has totally changed in the workflow. My big concern, and the one that I get from like people who've been like web developers and other things, is that they start to use the things that they learned in the other setup in those patterns as like their default Unity implementation, and they make everything so much harder on themselves right from the start, because they start instantly like, I need my main method, I need my thing. So I'm curious. Like, I definitely see the value and totally understand your point of view there. I'm just curious, have you seen that happen? Is that something that you think is an issue, or is something just kind of worked around? Because I think you were like an experienced game programmer before you jumped into Unity. You weren't just like I've made console apps, right?
So I had some experience with XNA and some other things prior to going to Unity, and I was just as baffled as you explained, that I didn't understand where the hell is everything getting called? Why the hell do I have components? What order do they run in? Why is this method getting called after that one method, even though they're the same? So it was incredibly difficult at the start, but the one tip I have for that is you just have to understand that you're working with a code package someone set up for you, and there is no magic. It's just code someone else wrote first. You're just using it. And I already worked in a team, so I can assume, oh yeah, Unity is my friend, in quotes, and it decided that I should make my code here and here. It already handles the entire backend for stuff. And when you're making your code, it's just remembering, yeah, sure, you have your console, you have your main, and you may have made a character that calls that one method. Now you can only edit code in that one method. That's exactly what Unity does. It's controlling the main, and it's making one method that you can edit. Yeah, you. But yeah, that's basically it. I know that people can make it harder on themselves. I just hope that better training and the proper reading of the manual can cover for it.
Yeah. What about you, Andrew? Did you do any non-Unity C# stuff ever, or have you been 100% just in Unity?
I didn't even start using C# until Unity forced me to, by so rudely taking away the Unity script version. That was when I started.
What about Boo?
See, I stayed away from Boo. That sounded scary.
Yeah.
See what I did there?
All right, that's the clip of the day.
Yeah.
Just cut it out and make a short. It's done.
Yeah. No, so C# I have never done anything outside of that. And that's actually something that I thought about from time to time. Like when it comes to doing anything outside of Unity, like if I were to make a game, just a game, I would be lost as where to start. I have no idea where I would use C# outside of Unity. So
that's a fair point. You'd have to find the XNA installer. See if you get URI to send that to you. You can install it and start making your game. Now, there are some options though, but just kidding. All right, so I want to kick off the giveaway in just a second. Are there any other? Oh, that's an interesting key there. Are there any other questions that you guys want to take a look at, or things real quick before I start the giveaway? I'm going to load it up, get it ready, and let people start entering, and then we'll just answer a bunch more questions. Let's stop screen sharing. I'll screen share again. We'll hit play on my amazing, beautiful battler. Oh, and do we need to nerf any classes from last week?
Don't remember if we did or didn't.
I don't remember if I nerfed any after the last one, so maybe I'll just leave it. I might have already nerfed them. All right, if you want to enter, it looks like a couple people already joined. We got assassins, bards, berserkers, paladins, warriors.
Last week, I think we had 4 different classes in the last round, so
okay.
We might be okay.
A big variety. Oh, let's leave it then and see. So if you want to enter to win a Unity license, or not a Unity license, a JetBrains Rider license. It's a 1-year license. They give us for free to give away to a random viewer or watcher. All you have to do is type in the race and or class or both that you want. You can just be a rat. You can be a rat bard, a paladin, warrior, wizard, berserker. I don't know. There's a bunch of different classes, a bunch of different races. You just pick the one that you want, and then you'll fight. All of the classes have different stats and stuff, and I don't remember what any of them are. So hopefully you pick a good combination, you join in, and you win. If not, you can just come back next week and try again. So I'll let this fill up, and once we get like 100 or so contestants in there, we'll kick it off. And I think for now we can just jump back over to questions. So I've got a few more pinned, and I don't know if you guys had any that you wanted to hit, but if you do, let me know. Otherwise,
I think I had one, but I lost it, and I can't find it. I'm losing it. So please just go ahead.
Totally understandable. So let's see. Let's find. There was one about. Oh, here, let's check this mouse one real quick. Nice simple one. We'll start with. Is it better to use input.getMouseButton and input.touch, or use eye pointer down to click on and drag objects from mobile devices?
So
Is
this
there
is a
any
bit of a
limit?
loaded question.
Is there a
So it's a bit.
limitation with how many you can do, like multi-touch,
I think it supports up to 10 or something.
but not get mouse button down, right?
It's not. Yeah, I mean, mouse is a mouse, but it's only going to translate as one.
Yeah.
But regards to eye pointer down, um, so that's part of the graphic raycaster system, and that is and the event system in Unity. I think it's part of the UGUI package generally. It should be the better way because it abstracts things in a way that you can do more with it. You can control the code more cleanly because it lets something else manage when you get those events. It's a bit difficult to explain the concrete benefits, but it lets you write cleaner code for the things that you're trying to do instead of sticking it in a method and praying that it works right forever per input that you get. Because if you're trying to do 2 input touches at the same time, you just have to implement eye pointer down and you don't care which input is it. You don't have to iterate all the input touches. That's the point.
So generally you go with the eye pointer down?
Yeah, you should at least.
Yeah.
And then if you also change the input system for the new one instead of the legacy that's referenced here, then nothing breaks. So that's another advantage.
That is a very, very good point. All right, let's take another one on code. So what's a good way to layer code in Unity? Like presentation layer for animations, particles, business logic. How do you kind of split that up? What does the architecture look like? And I think we loosely talked about this with the MVC discussion, the model view controller that came up a little bit ago. But I think it probably warrants a little bit deeper discussion. And my general rule for it is not the way that I layer things isn't so much like I would layer my web and business apps, but it's not too different. It's more focused on the entities and the things managing the entities. And then those are bound to some backend data. So I'll have some data that all of my entities can bind to, usually their own data. And then the business logic will be basically the controllers for those characters or the controllers for the controllers of those characters or objects. And then the view will be my visual representation. Some scripts on top of that that control any custom stuff for particles, visuals, animations. Those essentially build up the view. And I'll have those as usually separate scripts, one controlling animation for the object, another one controlling possibly particles and other stuff. So kind of get the loose idea at least. What about you guys?
Take this? No.
I have no idea.
Well, in my case, I tend to try and make presenters for information that I have persistent. And that's just finding whatever components I need to and setting whatever values I need. In regards to animations and particles and all that, I just use the Unity components and I'm trying to keep it as simple as I can. Usually I would generalize a tiny bit by having a component call the things that I want to have. For example, character animations call def animation, but I don't tell it in the animator what a controller what exactly animation. I instead expose a field for it, and I'm saying this is your def animation. For say a wolf, it goes down. For a dragon, it leans its neck. Whatever you have, and I'm trying to keep it within the my components realm to call whatever I need, and then they call the Unity components for whatever they need from the Unity components. And that's purely just because I like replacing my implementations with fancier ones. I have a very bad case of asset creeping. So if I try to present particles nicely, I'll start making custom shader presenters for them, and then I might just import X weapon trail because I like prettier weapon trails instead of the Unity default ones, and I might start using the new VFX systems instead of the legacy particle ones and all that. So keeping it in my component and then just switching whatever that component uses is way easier for me. But beyond that, I'm trying to not go any farther layers.
Try not to overcomplicate it too much.
Yeah.
Andrew, I wanted to ask you this question real quick. Well, first, everybody, if you're still watching, you want to join, we got a little bit more space left. Just pick a race and class to join the giveaway to win a rider copy. But Andrew, or anybody interested in helping their team build a metaverse, this was a super chat that popped up, and I wanted to pop it up and just, I guess, quickly talk about metaverse stuff. Is that what are your thoughts on this? You want to build a metaverse?
Talk about metaverse stuff? Is that even possible?
Or a metaverse game?
I think, yeah, metaverse games. My first reaction here is what you're really building is a game, and a game that people can play multiplayer. So it's a multiplayer game, clearly, and it's one that people can play with VR, with AR. Can they? Is this Pokemon Go? Because essentially that's a metaverse game, right? It's or you're building Second Life. You're trying to build a game where people can buy and own stuff, own property. All of
maybe
the
they're just building in Facebook's thing, right? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see where the whole metaverse thing goes, but from what I have seen, most of it is just like people building MMOs, and now it's been renamed to a metaverse. It's an MMO with plugins, essentially, which was like VR chat. Was one of the first VR ones that I remember playing. So I mean, I personally, maybe somebody in chat is. There's certainly a possibility that somebody in chat's interested in it. I'm sure both you guys would be busy for something like that, or to build any other projects. But yeah,
I think it'll be fun, and people should do this. Keep track of what big name folks say today about the metaverse, what it is, what it's going to be, and then 10 years from now, 15 years from now, we can look back and laugh at how wrong everybody was, or say, wow, that person was pretty spot on. It reminds me of those old AT&T ads about the internet. If you've ever go on YouTube, search for AT&T internet ads from the 90s, and they're talking about what you'll be able to do with the internet.
And a lot of you might even be able to access your bank on the internet.
I know. You might even be able to make a video phone call from a payphone.
Whoa, a video phone call from a payphone.
Yeah. And if you go back even further, there's videos from the 1960s, I think, about what an electronic home would look like. And it's very gendered. It's hilarious the way things have changed. But how the father can check his stocks from a terminal, and he prints out all these stock ticker symbols on a piece of paper, and it's hilarious. So whatever the metaverse is not what we think it is today. And I think, to your point, Jason, you're building a game, and you're adding new things to it, whether it be an internal marketplace, the concept that somebody can own something, even though that's already been the case. You don't need any new technology for most of what the quote unquote metaverse is. It's just putting the pieces together in a different way, and that'll be interesting. So, yeah.
Great. All right,
I want you're very interested.
I'm going to jump over to a technical question, but we're only one like away from 200, and I want to start the giveaway. So as soon as somebody hits like and we hit over 200, I'm going to kick off the giveaway battle. So if you want to enter, now is kind of your last chance. Pick a race class. Just type rat and warrior or wizard or whatever you want to get in. Have an opportunity to win. And then I'm going to hit the button those likes just came in. So I'm going to hit the button in just a second. But first I'll pop up the question, ask it, and give everybody their last couple seconds to join. So the question was, when we try to access the velocity of a rigid body in kinematic state, it shows 0. And they want to know why. Why does a kinematic rigid body's dot velocity property just showing 0, 0, 0? So it's 0 it's a vector, essentially, is what you get back. So why is it all zeros? Who knows the answer to that one? And let's start the giveaway.
Well, do you want to get into the technicality of why it will show 0?
Well, yeah, I think just tell them. Well, first, just tell them what the word in there that's making it 0 is, and then maybe a reason on why.
Yeah. So the term kinematic means it's not affected by the physics simulation. It can only affect it. It's an external thing that the simulation treats as a God object. It cannot do anything with it, but it's there for it. You have complete control on kinematic objects, and therefore velocity does nothing for them. So, because you're in full control and you don't have the concept of velocity, they will not have velocity to give you.
Yep, that's pretty much it. The kinematic rigid bodies don't use physics, or they don't get controlled by physics, so they don't have a velocity. You have to move them yourself.
Yeah.
Like I said, that was a nice simple one.
Yeah, and also just to make sure that you're doing things right, kinematic rigid bodies can still be moved in the physics simulation nicely, and use the lerp interpolation and extrapolation. You just have to use the rigid body dot move position and rigid body dot move rotation when they're kinematic. Something that a lot of people miss, so be mindful of it.
All right, let's do another one. So, how do you find splitting up your time as a dev job or doing your own project? So, I guess the question's worded a little bit weird, but essentially, how do you split up your time between your work projects, your actual dev job, and your own side projects? Because they're having a problem with it, which I think a lot of people do. As much as they love, having two projects and having the jobs they're doing, and then a full-time side project, it gets overwhelming. Probably run out of time, and you just feel like you're constantly working, right? Like it can be definitely draining and overwhelming. So what do you guys have some ideas or recommendations for this? I know that my buddy Chris, like, he's really, really good at this, and he schedules out his time perfectly and doesn't run into this issue. But it's something that I just struggle with it and deal with it. I just stay overwhelmed. What do you guys do? I don't have a good solution other than I try to calm down when I feel overwhelmed. I go get a massage or something. Eat a lot of ice cream.
I don't find it overwhelming. I do find that I don't have enough of it, and I'm getting extremely angry when I'm misusing it. But it's more of a case of just wanting to be able to do more. It's not that I'm getting upset that I don't. Definitely not overwhelming.
What about you, Andrew? You have a lot of things going on.
I find that I can do 3 things like on an ongoing basis, and that's it. And if I have to do more than 3 things on those job, family life, side projects, anything else beyond that means that something's going to start suffering. And really, I can focus on 2 of those things with my time, without the other being, feeling like I don't have enough time. I mean, I think, it probably doesn't have to be said, but the ideal would be that your job is so fun that, or it is your own project, you're fully self-employed. I think a lot of people are trying to get to that point. I know with Infinity VR stuff, wouldn't it be great if that was so successful that was what I did, and I could just make games and assets all day long, and that would be an ideal for me. That's why when I started Infinity VR, I was self-employed. It just didn't make the money. There's a video about that on YouTube. And so I had to get a job. So the ideal is really to get to the point where you either love your job so much that it's not something that you have to pick and choose between. It's just, it's just fine. Or your hobby is your job. And that's a challenge, of course. But other than that, I think having that separation is really helpful. If you're working from home, it might be more difficult, because I know I use my personal computer now for my day job stuff. My work laptop is for Zoom and this, and that's all it does now. And so there's, my main computer I make for my own games is, I got Slack on it, and I get messages late at night, and I'll reply. And so there's a little bit of that, but having that separation is helpful. Being very strict with yourself, I guess, about the timing, saying, hey, it's 5:00. I am done with the day job, and the day job can wait until tomorrow. Some companies are better at that than others. Some managers are better at that than others. others. So hopefully, if you're fortunate enough to have a company that values work-life balance and tells you from time to time, no, you should not be working at night. You should not be working on the weekends. And hey, this Friday is a day off for everybody. Do not work. Like
Don't
nobody.
tell Salim that.
Yeah,
You might have to
exactly.
quit. Like what? Can't work.
Workaholism bad.
But I agree, it can be overwhelming.
Yeah. So this question, I think, ties into it, and it says, "How do I stay motivated enough to work on my games? I get burned out very fast, and this is an extreme, but literally a day or two fast." And I think that it ties into the last question, because if what you're doing in that spare time is actually productive and you're kind of pushing the needle forward on your game, you're making some progress, it's a lot easier to stay motivated and a lot easier to feel not like you're overwhelmed, because you don't feel like you burned 4 hours this day but you've made no progress, things just got worse, or now like the game doesn't even build, right? So you want to make sure that if you only have a small amount of time to dedicate to something, or a bit of time on the side, that you're relatively intentional with it and making sure that you're pushing towards the thing that you want to do and avoiding getting distracted by like the shiny new thing that you saw on Reddit today and going to try to implement that into your game, or some new process that you heard about. Now you're going to go add that. Like, make sure that you're making forward progress on it the whole time, I think.
To put a bit more of a pointer on it, Jason's story would likely say something about small wins here, which is the concept where if you have a big task, it seems insurmountable, and that will feel like you're not making any progress, even if you are. And that will in turn reduce your motivation and eventually defeat you, make you burn out. So what you can do is you split your task into smaller tasks, and then split those tasks into even smaller tasks until you have tasks that you can actually complete and cross off at a regular pace throughout your day. And you're not going to do anything beyond those tasks, so that you can feel like you finished something when you're done. It's going to be helpful in maintaining positivity throughout the project and maybe help you last beyond the day or two.
Yeah, small tasks. What can you do today? What can you do right now? It is a sort of a life thing, but yeah, big things always feel overwhelming. Our brains can't easily handle this idea of some huge Herculean task, but the reality is just one step. Take one step forward, and like climbing a big hill, it's going to take you 4 hours. It's going to suck along the way. There's going to be some good parts. There's going to be some bad parts, but it starts with one step. Just take one step. You don't need to get up the hill right in one step. You need to get up the hill in 4,000 individual steps and many challenges along the way.
And just on that point, in Skyrim, the mountain of High Hrothgar has 7,000 steps. So just remember that you've done all that in less than an hour and you didn't seem to mind.
Oh, yeah.
There was a question in here I had to pop up. It says, is working 12 plus hours a day as a programmer okay and possible? It is without a doubt possible. I know lots of programmers who work like 20 hours a day because they just can't stop. 12 hours is probably an extreme. I wouldn't recommend doing it all the time, but I know a lot of programmers who just kind of work in big, long stints. So they might like code for 12 or 16 hours and then not do anything for another 24, and then code another 24 hours on and 24 off. So it's definitely not like it's unokay, but I find that for me personally, I'm more productive if I do a couple hours at a time and then come back fresh and do a couple hours again. When I was younger, I probably 12 hours was easy stuff. I'm like, just start at 8 at night and finish at 8 in the morning.
If you're doing it for recreation, sure, have fun. Just make sure to take care of your health. Overworking is not good. Do not overwork and do not burn yourself out. Your body has a physical limit. Make sure you mind it.
Yeah.
I just want to be very, very clear about this.
It's about the health. It's about the end result. If you're okay with it and you can do it and your life is fine and you're not having a negative impact on your life, then fine. Although I would say that it's inappropriate, in my view, for an employer, especially in a salaried position, to demand that you work more than 8 hours a day. There are going to be days where you do a long day. There's going to be days where you cut off early and don't feel bad because 2 weeks ago you did a long day. that happens. Being flexible is cool. That's, being part of a team and whatnot. But it's not appropriate for any employer, whether it's a contract gig or whatever, to say you have to work 12 hours a day or you can't have this job.
I think the typical 9, including the hour for lunch, is usually good. Although I do know some people who really prefer to work like 4 10-hour shifts, or some of them that wanted to do 3 like 12-hour shifts. That's just the way that they preferred to work, because they were, a lot of them are single guys that lived on their own, and it's just like the way they want to work around their rating schedule and other things, right? They want to just code and code and code and code. So 8 hours is what you should expect, though. If your boss is saying, hey, you have to work 12 hours a day on a regular basis, there's a big problem.
Yeah.
At least my door. All right. Oh, well, congratulations to the winner. I didn't even realize we had a winner happen while I was blabbing and talking. So a necromancer lizard this time too. Congratulations, Ilias. Send me an email, jason@game.courses, and I will send over your license hopefully later on today before I head out to GDC and stuff. So yeah, congrats. And let's take this question of why Rider over Visual Studio for the winner. Why is the winner lucky?
Yes. So when we're getting to interactive development environments, the IDEs like Rider and Visual Studio, the benefits of them is that they simplify what you need to think about and what you need to write. They try to guess what's carrying your intent the best and giving it to you, so that you don't spend time actually typing out the letters that you don't care about, and instead focusing on what you're trying to make. And in that regard, Visual Studio is generalized so that it can work on many, many different types of projects. But Rider is specialized specifically for each type of project in a different way, such that Unity benefits a lot more with it. Rider has tight integration with what Unity offers. And it can tell you things like your asset usages of your methods, if they're plugged into the inspector at certain points. And it can know that there is a hot path for certain methods and warn you when you have a method that is going to be very bad for your performance. Or when you're using a certain namespace, it can tell you that maybe that namespace isn't good for your Unity project because of reason X and Y. It mines Unity-specific features way more, and it gives you tools to save yourself headaches when you're working with Unity compared to Visual Studio's default implementation.
And it used to be JetBrains tools were kind of the only way to get a lot of that. And Microsoft's added a lot of that, but not for Unity. Like you said, Unity-specific stuff, JetBrains and Rider's is way ahead. It knows all of that little magic stuff that's in there. You can find your tags, find your object references, and a lot of other things. And it just makes really good code recommendations. It will tell you, hey, you shouldn't do this, improve your code. Oh, and here's a nice article that explains exactly why in plain English, why this isn't a great idea and why there's a better way to do it and how to do it. So I really love it as a tool, and I wouldn't really want to code without it ideally. It's by far my favorite. So
it's also integrated with their ReSharper, which is in general an amazing refactoring tool. And if you've ever used Visual Studio and then you're using Rider, the best comparison I've ever had to give someone is that Visual Studio is a butter knife and Rider is a freaking chainsaw revving with sparks.
Much faster to start up too.
Yeah.
A lot of people I know that switched, it was because Visual Studio's loading times got slower and slower and slower as their project got bigger. Switched to Rider, it opened up instantly and they were happy. So yeah, definitely try it out if you're not using it. All right, I think we're out of time. So I wanted to just say thanks everybody for coming out here and joining us. Please hit the like, subscribe, share buttons. If you wanted to join one of those mastermind groups, go to game.courses/mm, sign up before next week. I'll probably start doing the big scaled up invites next week or the week after that. And then if you're curious about the conference, go to gamedevguild.com. I'll put a link for that down below too. You can find out more about that coming up in just a couple of months. But I'm going to open up registration tomorrow. So outside of that, I've got nothing else. You guys got any final words?
Nope.
As the season is over, I hope that everybody's getting to play all of the games that are coming out this week and having tons of fun. We have Tiny Tina, Kirby game, Rune Factory 5, the Chaos Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy game came out last week. Elden Ring is still relevant, and they now found the thing that changes everything with doors that take 50 hits to show up. So there's a lot to do. Just hope that everybody's having a great time.
Get out there and play some games and make some games, I guess. All right. Well, we'll see
Watch
you.
GDC.
Yes.
Yep. See you at GDC. I'll be live from there a little bit, and then see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.